Good evening, everyone. This is the Select Board meeting for September 20th, 2023. It is now 6:40 p.m. We are not going to have our executive session here. I'm calling the meeting to order. We will not be taking a roll call vote to enter executive session, so I'd like everyone to please stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for those serving us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. This evening's meeting is being broadcast by Pegasus, and we thank them for that. It also is being recorded by them as well. So we will not be, as I'm saying, or as I said earlier, going into executive session. So I will start with announcements. The first is announce vacancies on the Keefe Tech School Committee. As follows: members of the Keefe Tech School Committee, South Middlesex Regional Vocational School, serve up to 3-year terms, and the appointments are made by the Select Board. The committee's primary responsibility is to establish those purposes, programs, policies, and procedures that will best produce the educational achievement needed by our students. The committee is charged with accomplishing this while also being responsible for wise management of resources available to the school system. The committee must fulfill those responsibilities by functioning primarily as a legislative body to formulate and adopt policy, by selecting an executive officer to implement policy, and by evaluating the results. The school committee meets once per month on Monday evenings at 7 p.m. and occasionally invites the school committee to participate in special subcommittees where needed. The qualifications for this committee are to be a Natick resident, to have experience in education and training that is highly desirable, and the ability to work collaboratively in all size groups and with the public is essential. There are currently 2 vacancies on the committee, and those are the 2 representatives for the committee. So candidates should follow the link and apply on the town website. It's under Keefe Tech School Committee on https natickma.gov 2006 Keefe-Tech-School-Committee, or you can simply just hit the apply button on that, which will be far easier than saying all that. And the next item is the announcement of the Community Preservation Committee. The Community Preservation Committee will be responsible for reviewing project funding requests for the Community Preservation Act funds and make recommendations to Natick Town Meeting for funding approval. CPA funds may only be spent on the core areas of historic preservation, affordable housing, open space, and recreational land use. 5 of the 9 committee members will be representatives from existing boards and committees: Conservation Commission, Historic Commission, Planning Board, Parks Commissioner, and Housing Authority. 4 members will be appointed by the Select Board. If you have an interest in these areas, please consider applying for one of the 4 appointed positions. As this is a new committee, one of the first responsibilities will be developing a set of rules and regulations to govern how the committee functions, including meeting frequency and timing, and procedures for receiving and evaluating applications. Applications in the sense that of opportunities to invest those funds. The first set of members for the CBC will play an important role in setting the tone for how the committee may run for years to come, and we look forward to receiving applications. So again, hit the apply button on the natickma.gov website and we look forward to receiving your applications. Next up is flu clinics. Their Board of Health or the Health Department has announced that there are flu vaccine clinics for Natick residents. The Natick Health Department will have 2 community clinics for Natick residents aged 6 months or older. Pre-registration is required for both. The first is on Saturday, October 14, 2023, and will be a drive-through clinic at the DPW. And the URLs, I'll talk about those later. The second date is Wednesday, October 18th, 2023, at the Community Senior Center, and that is not a drive-through. You will have to park and come inside and get your flu shot. For ages 65 and older, the high-dose vaccine is available while supplies last. Flu vaccines are free, regardless of your health insurance status. The link for registration are on the Health Department page in the town's website at natickma.gov. If you're not able to register online, the Health Department personnel are happy to assist you by calling 508-647-6460. And the last item that I have that I just picked up on the way in is Natick Porch Fest is this coming Saturday, September 23rd, from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., with a rain date of September 24th, 2 to 6 p.m. Visit natickporchfest.org for details. And it's sponsored by Music Go Round in Natick. And I have to say, I live on a cool street because 2 of my neighbors' porches are dedicated to hosting for this event. So I'm looking forward to it. Do we have any other announcements? No. Do we have any? We didn't have people in the room before, and I neglected to ask if there was anyone here who wanted to speak in public speak. And public speak is limited to 15 minutes with no more than 5 minutes per person. The board will take it under advisement, but there will be no commentary. Mr. Joseph.
Sorry, just as a point of order, because the executive session was on the agenda, we might want to consider if people jump in on Zoom at 7:30, the public speak had a time attached to it, and I would suggest you obviously make it available, but if people jump in, that might be an opportunity later.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, so we'll be revisiting that one in a little while. So now, let's move on to the main event. Are there any select board updates? Mr. Sidney.
Yeah, I have a couple. No action on this one tonight, but I started to contact the members of the Audit Advisory Committee, and one of them has resigned. So we will have a vacancy there. And if somebody's interested in the public, obviously, feel free to apply through the website. The other thing is, on Natick Days, I took the time to go into Boston to visit the people lobbying for the Healthy Youth Act. It was really enlightening. A large number of them were from Natick. It's a statewide lobbying effort, but it's being driven out by high school students here in Natick, which is kind of gratifying that they're that active. The bill that just passed that we got notified about is not the Healthy Youth Act. It's something related, probably less than what the Healthy Youth Act is. And my understanding is that they're still advocating for the more complete Healthy Youth Act. The Healthy Youth Act is an act, it's actually co-sponsored by Dave Linsky. It asks for any school district that is offering sex education. If they don't offer sex education, it doesn't apply. But when they offer sex education, it has to be complete and deliver complete information regardless of, physical gender, internal gender, sexual identity. It's supposed to be, delivering good scientific information, non-judgmentally, and an attempt to also lower the bullying levels of these kinds of, for these kids that don't have, that aren't in the mainstream. So it was very gratifying, and I just wanted to let the board know that it's a really good movement, and I think they're going to keep going for the more complete bill, and some small steps have been made.
Thank you. Thank you. And also thank you for representing us, because you did double duty that day with Natick Days as well as this, so I appreciate that very much. Anything else? Okay, let's move on to discussion and decision. We have a resolution for Ms. Diane Packer. Mr. Sidney.
Thank you. This is a resolution in honor of Diane Packer. Whereas Diane Packer was raised in Natick and is a proud member of Natick High School's class of 1975, and whereas Diane and her husband Paul Griesmer raised their sons Bennett and Lee here, and whereas Diane was a town meeting member, chair of the school committee, and assistant director volunteer coordinator for the Council on Aging, and whereas Diane was first elected as town clerk in March 2010 and served in that capacity until October 2023, and whereas Diane qualified for the Massachusetts Town Clerk Association's prestigious Certified Massachusetts Municipal Clerk designation, and whereas Diane oversaw local and federal elections during an unprecedented time through the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas Diane, shall we say, has a very expressive style, and whereas Diane always performed her job duties without any complaints, and whereas Diane was so dedicated to the other town hall employees that she would visit each department regularly to share their snacks, and whereas Diane was willing to park in any municipal lot, her motto being, the further away the better, and whereas even if Diane had a strong opinion on a matter, she would always keep those opinions to herself, and whereas Diane may believe that she might not be suited as a now appointed town clerk and hired as such, but we can confidently say today that we would be honored to elect or appoint Diane as our town clerk again. And whereas Diane has earned the respect and gratitude of her colleagues, elected and appointed town volunteers and officials, and the general public in the way in which she has approached her responsibilities to the citizens that she serves each and every day. And whereas Diane will retire on October 8th, 2023, after many years of dedicated service to the town of Natick, and the Select Board wishes to recognize Diane as she prepares to begin her retirement. Now, therefore, the Select Board congratulates Diane Packer on her well-deserved retirement, extends its sincere appreciation for her many years of dedicated service to the town of Natick, and wishes a long, happy, and healthy retirement in the company of her family, her loved ones, and her many friends. In witness thereof, we have hereunto set our hands and caused the seal of the town of Natick to be affixed this 20th day of September 2023, and I so move.
Do I have a second? Thank you. Moved by Mr. Sidney and seconded by Ms. Coughlin. All in favor, say aye.
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 And that is 500. Thank you so much, Ms. Packer. We are
So going to miss you.
Yeah.
Yes. Feel free to make any remarks. and retorts if necessary.
Thank you very much. This is a lovely honor, and I really appreciate it, most of which was all true. And I totally appreciate the support and that I've had from both the administration in town, but also from the citizens and residents of the community. And it's been a great run, and I've really enjoyed it. But I am really looking forward to not being up early in the morning. Thank you.
Sign that piece.
We do, now that we've approved it,
You need to sign it? Okay.
Very funny.
sign it, I'll drop it downstairs. Okay, so, moving right along.
You want to wait for the paper?
Yeah,
We're just signing
we'll
it?
sign it fast. We're going to take a
Real time.
brief recess to sign this resolution. Okay, we're back in session. Next item on our agenda is to approve one-day alcohol licenses for 3 separate days for AMVETS. And I can read them, that's probably just as easy, which is one-day alcohol license application and NPD recommendation for September 23rd, Natick High School reunion. That's going to have Diane Packer and David Linsky in the same place. That could be trouble. One-day alcohol license application for September 24th for a cornhole fundraiser, and a one-day alcohol license application for September 28th, Army National Guard meeting and cookout. Is there any discussion? Okay, do I have a motion?
Move for approval?
And then a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Okay, that passes unanimously. Sorry, I'm channeling my Diane Packer there. Okay, next up is the financials update. Mr. Erickson, do you want to tee it up, or just have John get right into it?
Well, as John sets up, I'll just do a very brief intro. For the publics who might be watching, as well as members of the board that may be new. Sorry. No, that's fine. It's the time of year whereby we have some year-end close information to share, as well as prep work for the next year when it comes to budgeting. We're already looking at FY24 25 budgeting, and so we've already been doing some forecasting work. So it's around this time that our financial team really starts to put together and looking at our forecasting for the future, as well as close out of the last fiscal year, which is FY23. So what you're going to see tonight are actually 2 different presentations from John and team. Each one is going to be about 15, 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more. We'll pause between each one to let the board digest, ask questions, seek input from the public or what have you, and then move on to the next one. We'll also do a very brief high-level overview of the capital program that's going to be reviewed at town meeting this fall by the other John Townsend, by John Marshall. That'll be at the end, and that'll be just the high-level reviews, just so you have a chance to see what's coming forward at this town meeting. As you may know, the full 5-year capital update actually doesn't happen until January 1, so that's when we would do another 5-year round, but this is really just for this fall. So without further ado, John Townsend, Deputy Town Administrator, Director of Finance, can take it away. You'll probably need also access to sharing if he doesn't have it already.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Erickson. Yeah, I will definitely need to share my screen. If I got access to that.
Are you co-hosts or? There we go. Perfect.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the Select Board. John Townsend, as Mr. Erickson said, Deputy Town Administrator and Finance Director, here for the year. The year-end FY23 close, as well as our financial indicators, the first set we're going to talk about. I will say, sitting in here with a room with Diane waiting for you to sign something, I thought maybe we were going to do a bond issue or something, but No, we're going to be doing our financial review. So first of all, I would like to just sort of run through, and for some reason this does not want to work for me. There we go. Our year-end review. So we're just going to go over some continued signs of improvements in our revenues, on track, local receipts recovery, consistent patterns in expenditures, and then we're talking just briefly about our enterprise funds and how they're doing. But first of all, I'm just going to start with the revenues for FY23. These are of 6/30/2023. Tax levies, state aid, and local, and the two at the top there, 98.62% are tax levy. That's actually a very good collection rate for us. Very strong collections there. State aid's 99.89% of their target, which is good. Now, I spend most of my time on local receipts. Of course, those are one of our major drivers with regards to various things. First, I'll start off with the motor vehicle excise tax. We're 125.82% above our target at $6,039,448. What's sort of good about this is that actually exceeded our FY19 collections on that rate, motor vehicle excise tax. So that's a very good indicator that we are almost back from COVID. Not quite, but we're almost there. And that was a very good indicator of that. Going down a little bit further, ambulance fees and other charges. See if I can get my little pointer going here. How about, so skip around here a little bit. Ambulance fees and other charges, 198.99% of our target of basically $2 million. Here, I just want to point this out for you. This is first of all, the effect of the increased rates that you approved. So they are going in effect, being very effective with raising additional revenues. But also, interestingly enough, this also includes a fairly large increase in our number of transports. I'm not certain, I haven't talked to the chief about that, but we see both an increase in the rates, of course, as well as additional transports. License and permits up 110.11%, $2.8 million. Parking things basically coming back more towards normal, improving that. Fines and fees, 414,000.72%. What that is, there's sort of an adjustment with regards to we had reduced that quite severely during the pandemic. Investment income was up about 450% to $1.12 million. This basically reflects the fact that we actually had a large amount of cash on hand for FY23 due to, and we're going to go into this a little bit more, some vacancies that we had, as well as some of our capital projects weren't moving along quite as quickly as they thought they would. So we had some money that we had borrowed we were invested in. So that came out much stronger than we had planned on it. Miscellaneous non-reoccurring, these are amounts of money which we can't actually technically budget for. The $198,000 basically is the opioid settlement money that we're going to be working on getting town meeting to appropriate so we can get those into effect shortly. So the total revenues for FY23, $169,307,929, $102.06% above what we had targeted for FY23. Oops, going the wrong way. Just a little bit of more detail about local receipts. Probably have seen this slide before, one of my favorite. Little box over here on the right-hand side, this orange box, that's where we should have been with our local receipts had COVID not happened. Little gold box in the middle there, that's what we had, our targets were, what our budgeted amount was. And then over here in this blue box, that's where our actuals came in at. So we actually did fairly well with regards to our targets, 141.5% over what we had actually budgeted for. But we're still lagging by about 12% where we would have been had we not had COVID. Now, this is an improvement over FY22, where we were 31% below where we should have been without COVID. So we are definitely coming back, and coming back fairly strongly. Just taking a look at the local receipts COVID gap. right here in the green line there is our post-COVID trends, as well as our blue line here. So basically in FY26, we will be back to normal with regards to our local receipts. That, of course, is good news for us because once again, local receipts are very closely tied to the economy in Natick, and is a good indicator that we are bouncing back strongly. In fact, this is about a year earlier than we actually thought we would. So we're ahead of where we probably should have been, or we speculated we would be at this particular point in time. Turning to our operating revenue expenditures, pretty much what we would expect, 99% for the schools. Libraries at 96%, public safety 93%, maybe a little bit down from where we would usually expect them to be expending. But once again, for FY23, they did continue to have a lot of salary savings because of their inability to sort of replace a lot of their positions. Public Works, unfortunately, 106% over budget. This is once again, we talked previously about how the fact that DPW is one of those areas that was very hard hit with regards to supply chain problems, inflationary effects on especially utilities. Remember, all of our utilities are located in this budget, so we would have expected to see a little bit more with regards to their particular budgeting issues for FY23. Health and Human Services, 79%. Basically, there was some adjustments there with regards to the salaries and the reconfiguring of that somewhat. So it's a little lower than we would have expected, but most of those issues have been resolved. And for FY24, they will be continuing on with their service provision as normal. General Administration, 96%. Committee, 74%. And shared expenses at 97%, which actually that's actually not a bad number. I thought, given the fact that we had an increase of, I think it was it 10% on our insurance coverage, our health insurance costs, that would have been a little higher, but 97% was where we came out at the end. Oops, don't want to skip over enterprise funds. Just very quickly on enterprise funds, their fund balances for both of them are very strong. Water and sewer at $4.7 million. And the golf course at $372,807. Both bode well for the retained earnings. Just one little comment, of course, on the Sosmo Trace Golf Course. This is FY24, the first year they will not have a subsidy. So actually this bodes well at that particular position at the end of the year for their future success without a subsidy from the town. So we're going to move on into the second portion of this particular presentation. We're going to talk about our financial indicators. I don't know if any of you have seen this previous presentation, but we basically provide the same sort of set of indicators with regards to the health of the town's financial positions. So we use these to sort of take a look at the trends and to sort of provide us some guidelines with regards to how we're doing. We do use the traffic lights here, green. Everything is going well. We're within our policies. Yellow, we have some concerns. Maybe we missed the target or two. There's something we need to take a look at and make sure we watch that. And then red, yes, we're having some difficulties there. Maybe we're not applying our policies or not meeting our policies and our targets, and we definitely need to work on those issues. So the first line up that we like to talk about is the total net operating revenues. This is nominal dollars, that's revenues with inflation, as opposed to the constant dollars, which is the blue portion on the bottom of this chart here, revenues without inflation. Just prefer to take a look at the blue portion here, the constant dollars, revenues without being adjusted for inflation. You'll see here this sort of trend downward, and that was about a 3% trend between the end of 2020 and 2022. Obviously, the effects of inflation, as well as, of course, our loss of revenues. You'll see a sort of trend upward from 22 running in through 23. So definitely the trend, as we sort of mentioned previously in looking at our revenues, is upward on a positive slope, which therefore we do designate that as a yellow. Still not quite where we want to be, but we're getting very close to it. And that is very hopeful in the fact that last year we actually had this as a red indicator. So we are improving with regards to our total operating revenues moving into 24. Economic growth revenues, a percent of our net operating revenues. Some of the revenues that we include here, of course, are local receipts, meals and hotel taxes, excise, motor vehicle excise taxes, and of course our permit fees and new growth. Those revenues that do indicate the strength of our economy here in Natick. So we do have some good news here, and that little blue portion at the end here shows a definitely trend upwards. So in looking at both the health of Natick's economy as well as revenue producers, we do have a green light there, and things are moving along in the proper direction for us. This particular slide, this actually is a new slide. We didn't have this last year. I just wanted to put it in here. Basically what this sort of shows is override and levy capacity. We have not talked about, nor will we pretty much talk about this evening, overrides or debt exclusions. However, those are something which, as a board, you may be asked to think about in the future. So just wanted to assure you that when you do take a look at our override and exclusion capacity, which is the difference between our levy limit and our levy ceiling, we are actually in very good health with regards to that, and we do, if necessary, do have the capacity to do a debt exclusion or an override should you wish to move forward with that. New growth by class. New growth, of course, is an important part of our budgeting process. Last year we had $1.8 million in new growth, which was excellent. One of the best numbers I've definitely ever seen here. And hopefully this year we're going to have maybe probably not that good, but a pretty good number as well. Obviously, our residential sector has helped with that particular number, but also just going to point to the top there, the personal property. And our assessing office does a lot of work with making certain that we do get out there and tax that personal property for our new growth and provide us with an excellent number moving forward. Operational use of one-time funds. This, of course, is the use of things like free cash, stabilization funds, ARPA monies, CARE monies, one-time funds in our budget. We actually were cited in our DSL report for having a little bit too much of using one-time funds in our budget. Obviously, coming through a pandemic, that is not entirely surprising. And you'll see that in this graph here. If you take a look at 21 to 22 and 23, we did use a lot of one-time funds with regards to funding our budget. Of course, the little dotted green line up here is free cash, which of course is an important component of that particular equation, but in these particular boxes are also included stabilization funds, ARPA money, CARES money, as well as free cash. We have actually done much better for 24 with regards to cutting back on our use of one-time funds. So therefore, you're not seeing the 6.4 or the 5.8%, which we had in 2022 and 23 as we came through the COVID period of time. However, we're only going to give this a yellow because one of the things about this, and this is what the DSL reported, even back in 2018 and 2019 and 2020, we were above 4% with the use of single one-time funds in our budgeting process for our operational purposes. That is basically too high. And when looking at our free cash spending program from last year, you saw definitely a shift towards, getting away from using the operation, moving our free cash towards things like putting in stabilization, as well as using it for our capital as well, to get us away from the borrowing sort of problems. So, we're definitely something we're working on, but as you will see once we start talking about the forecast, we do continue to forecast the use of a fairly large amount of free cash in our operating purposes moving forward. So it's something that we do have to take a look at, and when we're doing our budgeting process, making sure that we're sort of aware of that as we go forward. Reserves as a percentage of net operating revenues. We do spend a lot of time talking about stabilization funds. We did an excellent job at our Springtown meeting with our free cash and making certain that we are putting things back into our stabilization funds. If you take a look at this, our current position is at 8.17 in our stabilization funds, or our reserves, basically, because this also includes, DOR does consider free cash as a reserve. So this is a combination of both the operating stabilization fund, general stabilization fund, as well as free cash. We are at 8.17, which basically actually is just hitting the bottom of our target level, which is actually very good considering the fact that if you look just back to 22 and 23, we weren't doing so well at all because we basically had to spend the stabilization funds as what they're here for. But in taking a look and sort of trying to analyze the spend here, if you look at 2017, we did hit our high mark with regards to sort of stabilization funds, a large amount of free cash there, but generally speaking, is that a $17 million? $17 million in overall reserve funds. We've taken a very close look at actually what happened to both our cash position as well as our spending and our revenues during the COVID timeframe, basically from the third and fourth quarters of 20 through the end of 22. Now, one of the things that we sort of saw there is that we did receive basically from the federal government and the state government as well a total of about $9.8 million in aid with regards towards our operating purposes here in Natick. Now, when you take a look at that and you took that away, so that we say we had another event in COVID, but this time around the feds didn't come through with any money, the state didn't come through with money, we're sort of left on our own. The question is what would happen to us based on how we had our stabilization funds set up at that particular point in time and our free cash was coming in. Unfortunately, we wouldn't quite have made it through. We would have been in front of you asking for cuts to various services we provide, and basically we wouldn't have done that badly because we were in actually a pretty good position, but at the end of the day, the sort of lesson that we're sort of learning from this is that 8.17% reserve ratios is a good place to be, but probably not where we want to be going forward, especially when you're looking down the road with economic uncertainties, is something we have to pay attention to. So definitely when we get our free cash, when we take a look at what we're putting towards stabilization, the plans that we're sort of going to put together are going to be recommending that we do look into trying to reach out, maybe not into the because the $9.8 million in order to cover that, our sort of reserve ratios would probably have to be around 17%. Now, I'm not necessarily saying we need 17% in our reserves, but maybe a 14 or 15%, what we had in 2017, would be much more comfortable with regards to making sure we can weather any particular economic downturns that come upon us in the future. Turning now to capital replacement or news, actuals versus targets. Little green bars down here are capital appropriations. This is our targets at the top. Is a spread between 6% and 7% targets. What's interesting here, of course, is 2020, 2021, and 22. We just talked about previously, we did cut back on our capital expenditures, basically to preserve our cash in order for operations. Last year, we did try to make up some of that. Unfortunately, we overshot our targets. So, we are for 24 projected to get back to where we probably should be that sweet spot between 6 and 7%. We're working on that. You can hear a little update on that shortly. But we're basically looking at a yellow there because this is something of concern. We want to make sure that we are funding our capital expenditures, but we also want to make sure that we don't sort of overdo it and get ourselves into a place where, we are short with regards to our ability to borrow. So just continuing on, the general fund debt ratio is currently at 9%. DOR and actually your financial management principles actually recommend that we stay between 8 to 10% of our ratio of debt to our revenues, and we're actually 9%. So the general fund is looking very good, and we do get a green there. What we do not look so good on is when we take a look at our enterprise fund debt ratios, particularly water and sewer. Golf course, of course, is in fairly decent shape, but water and sewer, unfortunately, is suffering from, I believe we would call it the PFAS effect. And that, we do have expenses, and there's going to be more of them coming up. But at the moment, where we probably would want to be at maximum 15%, we're currently for 24 projected at 18%. So that is something which, we do have to take a look at. We are working on that. Obviously, based on the PFAS issues, we will have additional capital issues coming up. So we'll be back in front of you with regards to making sure that we can adequately and safely accommodate those particular issues. And then finally, just the one slider with regards to our schools. These particular indicators find that the school enrollment as a percentage of the total population of the town is indicative of stress with regards to funding on the schools. If it's going up, ours has been going down. It has gone up slightly. This is data that we do receive from DESE. Basically, it doesn't have any particular concern with regards to the population of the percentage population of the school enrollment, and they should be adequately funded. So just the final summation of all the Natick indicators dashboard. We do have 3 yellows, 4 or 5 greens, and 1 red. So that concludes our financial indicators and analysis. I'll stop briefly to catch my breath and ask whether anybody has some questions we can answer for you.
Mr. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend, and thanks to your team. I know there's a lot of work that goes into all of this, and a very lean staff, but amazingly productive. Every time you come here, I'm just blown away by the detail and what you've been working on. So thank you on behalf of the community. A couple of quick questions. And as far as the red goes, the fact that we're investing in PFAS is not an indication of anything wrong. I mean, I'm very pleasantly, I'm not surprised, but I'm pleasantly surprised at how much green there is and how optimistic we can be given how things have rebounded so quickly. A year and a half ago, we weren't so clear. So this is amazing to see that we've managed through it. And I appreciate your guidance that we should be thinking proactively about where the ratios go moving forward. One question for clarification. Actually, I have 2 questions. One, if you could go back to the slide that showed the debt exclusion and override capacity. You had a line, and then you had some margin there that showed some excess capacity.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you talking about the little brown thing there?
Yeah, well, just if you could just kind of explain that a little bit. To me, I'm seeing where the levy ceiling is, and sort of if you could just operationalize this for me. How will we use this, and what does this mean for the community?
So obviously the blue down here is the property tax levy, and the actual top of the little brown, and that's where we sort of spend up to. The brown actually is the levy limit, and that would be our maximum amount that we can tax. Natick does have a history of taxing to the maximum amount. A couple of years back, we had about $500,000 left in our tax levy, and I received a lot of very concerned phone calls with regards to why it is that we did not spend all that money and it was wasted and left on the table. Generally speaking, I understand people that do want to spend to the limit there. However, we basically try to budget and try to tax with regards to what we actually need. If we don't need that money with regards to our operations, then I'd prefer to give the taxpayers a break. Obviously, if we need the money and programs are necessary and people want to spend it, by all means. We do have to keep a small amount of money because we do round. And when you get to the $150, $200 million numbers, it actually does require to have $40,000, $50,000 to make sure you're rounding it. But that's what that little squibble is there. I think for 2024, $112,000, I think we left on the tax levy. It varies. There are some towns that leave, there's a couple towns that have millions of dollars left on their tax levy. There's ones like Natick that often go right up to the level there. Mm-hmm. But that's what that particular little brown strip there is.
Yep. And then the blue margin that's above that?
Blue margin, that's the gap between the ceiling, how much we can actually spend up to if we take out debt exclusions or anything. I believe the gap there is, the levy ceiling, was it $46 million? I think it was around 46 to $50 million. 267? Okay. For 23. The ceiling is $276 million. I think we spend about 150, so.
Yep. Okay. So, if you could roll back the clock 2 years,
Yep.
3 years. I mean, one of the issues when I rejoined the board a couple of years ago was it was highly likely we'd be looking at an operating override in the next few years. And we talked about doing it in increments. Given our performance of late, and looking out with the 5-year forecast and the implications here, it doesn't strike me as that we have the same sense of urgency that we did a couple of years ago. There are certainly corrective actions we probably want to take in terms of budgeting, to, consider some incremental overrides in our future forecasts. I want to make sure that as we look at this as a community, we're not saying, wow, we're fine, we never have to have an override.
No.
And I want to be very clear about what the implications are.
Can I just interject something? That's part 2 of the presentation.
The forecast is coming up,
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Jumping the gun.
Some foreshadowing.
I'm
yeah.
foreshadowing a forecast.
You're
sorry.
right, you're right.
We'll definitely
That
talk
was
about that.
Yeah.
And I forgot to shout
infomercial.
4, so there you go. All right. And then on that, and what I heard from you, just to clarify what I heard, you mentioned that right now our sort of peak year in terms of reserve ratio was 14%, and you think we should be around 17%, but probably recommend around 14?
Yeah, I think around 14, 15, somewhere around there. It is sort of hard to tell because, like I said, we do have to factor in free cash.
Right.
And free cash is a very volatile, fluctuates greatly. So I don't recommend having 14% in stabilization funds, but when you look at sort of the average, amount of cash, the free cash we receive together with the stabilization funds, we should be in that sort of ballpark, yes.
Yeah, great. Well, again, thank you. A very good report. Appreciate it.
Mr. Sidney.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend. Staying on this slide, actually, one of the things I was wondering is where the actual used levy limit, used debt exclusions were relative, because we've got, the base property tax levy, and then we've already got a couple of debt exclusions, and it would be interesting to know, where those fall in this, on this chart.
Yeah, so the debt exclusions are included in the property tax levy.
Would it be possible to, like, maybe next time separate them out?
Yeah, we could separate it out. We could put another line right in there too. It's interesting. I actually hadn't intended to put this slide in, so I'm actually glad I did. But yes, we'll do that for you, and we can send it around to everybody. Take a look at it.
Yeah, and the reason I say is because, certainly the debt exclusion comes out of the taxpayer's pocket, but they're also planning tools. So, as we plan projects, if the debt exclusions are going down, that sort of exposes a possibility that maybe we can afford another debt exclusion, and maybe not. We don't know, because it's up to the taxpayers.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see how that line goes against the actual operational property tax.
Yep. Yeah, we
So-
can definitely show that.
That would be useful to, so, on to the,
Can I just interject something?
Sure.
while you're looking? My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Townsend, when you go to, you put out your budget book, you have the projections of, what things are coming out of debt service or coming out of debt exclusions, and it says, it has a timeline in which years they'll taper off. So that gives gives people an indication of what things are coming off the books and what things are
Yep.
still
I
on.
was just looking for the
Follow back.
overview of the same thing.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just,
Yeah.
Well, we can definitely put in a graphic presentation, which would be easier to see, quite honestly. Yep.
thank you.
Thank you. On the use of one-time revenues for operations slide, which is two further, that one.
Yep.
I'm wondering, because we've got the operational use of free cash,
Yep.
there's certainly the reserve use of free cash, like what goes into stabilization, but I was wondering if, on the next iteration of this slide, if we could show the amount of free cash used for capital,
Yeah.
just so that we could point to the fact that, it's just an extra useful data point.
Yeah, and once again, little foreshadowing here, because I'm going to have the discussion, we talk about the forecast, because we had the same exact thought, in that we used to just have free cash there with the plug 4 million. We're actually splitting it up, so you can actually see the free cash operation, then the free cash, which does go to either the stabilization or the capital. So
Yeah,
yes, we're
one-time
definitely
expenses.
working
Yeah.
on that, yep.
And then lastly, on the next slide, you said, we really should be around 14% of reserves. If I remember correctly, our financial principles say we should be at 10%. Now, I don't remember if that includes the free cash reserves, but I'm wondering if we should be looking at a policy change in that area.
Yes, that's a good point. That's one of the things we have been discussing, because DOR, this sort of slide, and this once again is not our, this is ICIM indicators, do consider free cash as a reserve. We have never considered free cash as a reserve. So excellent point taken that we do have to update those. So, and the next iteration with regards to when we make proposals for you with regards to our reserve amounts, we'll definitely probably have that sort of built into it. Yep.
Well, I think there's also something that the board has to do relative to policies, so
Yep.
that's why I raised it. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Ms. Pope?
Agreed. Thank you, John, for your presentation. Thank you to your team. I had a quick question on the capital replacement and renewal page slide on number 15.
Yeah.
The it says at the bottom that we're catching up to, I guess, pre-COVID, maybe capital expenditures. And it says that that led with 2 bond issuances. Is there an appendix that might tell what those 2 bonds are? Just so that it's part of the record as to what those bond issuances are?
So they are included in the budget book.
Okay.
I don't think they made it in FY24. Actually, one of them did. The reason why it looks like we did 2 bond issues in 23 is that we did one at the beginning, which is what we planned to, and then on the other side, we had planned it to be in June. Didn't quite make it, and it went into August.
Mm-hmm.
So it is technically in 23, but it actually should have been in the previous year. So, but yes, so the information on that is always in the budget book. So the budget for 24 will have that first bond issue there, and then in the upcoming budget book, we'll have it. But if you'd like the information, I'm happy to we'll send you a syllabus on exactly what it was.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just for the public's sake, those 2 bond issuances were really to help cover the capital costs for the years that we.
Right.
One was a pandemic year, a series or a couple pandemic years, and one was a catch up. So it's various projects that were covered through capital.
Mm-hmm. And the intent, as I recall, was to not negatively draw down free cash so much.
We're trying to keep our cash preserves as much as possible during the pandemic, so we borrowed more than we typically would have, because we were trying to hold our cash reserves as much as possible.
I just had one question. Most of my questions have to do with your next part of the presentation, so the only
Certainly, yeah.
question I had for this was, do you have a sense on the increase in local receipts? Do they tend to be from the hotels or the restaurants, or is there a place that's growing, that grew more quickly during 2023 that you didn't anticipate?
Actually, sort of across the board, the restaurant side of things actually bounced back much faster than we thought it would. The motels and hotels was a little bit slower with regards to the uptick on that. They both actually have come back better than we thought they were going to, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And people are buying cars like
Yes, absolutely.
Like crazy, it
Crazy.
seems.
The motor vehicle, that was probably the most shocking one, yeah.
WS.
Yeah, that's going to stop real fast.
Okay.
Don't say that.
Now, hopefully not soon.
Nope.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm just going to do a pile-on thank you. Sure. This was great work. It's very encouraging to see some of the things that good planning have forestalled. To my colleague's point about, a year or so ago, we were looking at not if we needed an override or debt exclusion, but when. And we were able to bounce back and get back on track. We do have the over-reliance is probably too strong a term on one-time reserves, but we know that, and we know we're going to change that in the future. So I'm very confident in the job that the Finance Department and Town Administration overall have done with this. I also wanted to give a shout out to the Public Safety departments, because they came in under budget, and they had a lot of overtime expense during the last year, and they managed that really well and came in under budget. So kudos to them. And let's go on to part 2, unless you need a drink of water or a break. Or both.
Yeah, both, yeah. Let me, I gotta bring up my other presentations. Those are our 2 presentations. Just before why I'm doing this, though, of course, I would just like to acknowledge Tian Wee, the Assistant Director of Finance, who's very instrumental in helping, especially getting the presentation ready for tonight. And also Gloria Wong, you probably all know. Unfortunately, she couldn't be with us today because she's on vacation in California.
Good for her.
So she said she'd try to Zoom in if possible, but that was a well-deserved vacation for Gloria. She's, of course, responsible for all of the slides and putting them all together for us.
She better not zoom in. Don't admit. No.
All right.
Okay, let me bring this up. Okay, so now for the main event, the financial forecast for FY25 through FY29. And we'll sort of skip through that. So just want to sort of set out some of the parameters with regards to what this is and what this isn't. Don't want people to get confused, but I want to make absolutely certain everybody understands this is not a budget. You're going to have to wait a couple more months before you get the budget presentations. This is a forecast. We do use this for our potential revenues and expenditures when we do develop the budget. That's one of the reasons why I like to get in front of you earlier rather than later, so that we can actually use these products with regards when we start looking at trends and how we're going to sort of set up the budget for a presentation. Facilitate productive financial planning. So the scope on this, as I sort of said, runs from 25 to 29. Recognize major revenue and expense categories within the general budget. So one of the things about this not being a budget, we actually sort of group them together. And what you will see is actually very sort of reminiscent of what our financials actually take a look at. This is how the accountants sort of group us when they're doing our financials. We do consider the interactions from enterprise funds and capital planning with regards to our forecast. So this gets back to the issue about overrides and debt exclusions, and that if we feel that there is something where there's a school planned or another large capital project that we there's on the horizon, we actually will build in to our forecast the debt exclusion, or if we feel that override is imminent or sort of going through that process, we will build that in. We did not build either an override or a debt exclusion into this forecast. And then, of course, this is based upon examination of historical data and relevant economic conditions that we're currently facing. So a couple of assumptions. We're going to start off with the revenues. Of course, 2.5% levy increase, $1.1 million is the sort of static number we're using for new growth, plus our debt exclusions, of course. State aid, 3.5% annual increases. That's what we have historically gotten. Hopefully we will continue to stay there. Local receipts. So the first couple of years of local receipts, 25 and 26, is actually based on the calculations we have with regards to where we think we're going to go with our revenues. After 27, as I mentioned, we do anticipate being back to our normal levels, and there's a 3% increase across the board with regards to local receipts on out. One-time funds, we do build in a $4 million free cash amount. overlay surplus of $500,000. You probably will note that during the COVID times, we did use an overlay release from the Board of Assessors of $1 million. Our overlay fund actually is in good shape. This is not really a reflection on that particular issue, whether we're going to have a lot of abatements here, but it is just the general feeling that, once again, getting back away from the one-time funds, and we would like to put that back to $500,000 where it has historically been before COVID. And then ARPA, $1.5 million for FY25. That might be additional ARPA monies, but for this forecast, we've only put in the 1.15 million for FY25. So the revenue forecast for FY25-29, once again, sort of going down there, this is what we sort of talked briefly about, the free cash. We did sort of break that out. This is based upon the percentages that we used in our last free cash spending plan, how we sort of broke that out. It is our intention that sort of moving forward, that's how we've been sort of looking at our free cash, trying to sort of target our capital as well as our stabilization plans in order to get those reestablished. We do not forecast using any stabilization funds during this period of time. Just talked about the overlay release. Other available funds, that's where you get your ARPA funding down there. Otherwise, it's just based on a historical amount in that particular line. For FY25, we are forecasting $190,659,125,000 in projected revenues. If I can find my cursor, that would help out. So moving on, excuse me. Moving on to the expense sides of things. First of all, collective bargaining agreements. Just like to note that most of them will be expiring in 24 and 25. We have not built in, we have the standard increases across the board for our departments. We have not built in any particular amounts for collective bargaining agreements in the forecast. New initiatives, likewise, are not included in the forecast, though obviously each year we do like to bring forward new initiatives from our departments. The across-the-board spending increases: school, 3.5% increase; towns, the town side, 3%; shared expenses, 3.17% increase. The shared expenses, 3.17% increase, I think is a little optimistic there, but Gloria does assure me that historically is what we do. So there it is. Debt service, we actually included all of the projects that are included on the capital plan. Once again, a little bit optimistic with regards to being able to get all that work done. So we'll probably have a little bit of savings there, but we do feel it's prudent that we do make sure we put that in there. Once again, showing our commitment to continuing with our capital improvements. And then we are forecasting an inflation sort of backing off to give us some relief there. One of the things I would like to note, of course, is the Federal Reserve Board did not raise the interest rates today, which was a big sigh of relief for a lot of us. So expense forecast, FY25 through FY29. Once again, general government, 3% education. The education includes both the schools, Keefe Tech, as well as the libraries. Once again, sort of how we sort of set things up at town meeting with regards to the articles there. So shared expenses, of course, the shared expenses, capital improvements, stabilization funds, and there are other below the line items. That's those school bus transportation, snow and ice, those sort of things that reside below the line on the budget. Looking at FY25, total expenses of $192,992,956. Total revenues of $190,659,125 for a deficit of $2,333,831. I'm not going to run through the rest of the numbers for you. But basically, what this sort of indicates to me is that, we actually, and it's hard to believe, are actually in pretty good shape. deficit at this particular point in time of $2.3 million actually is not unexpected, and is definitely something that I feel that we probably, through the budget process and working with our partners at the school, can definitely sort of deal with. In just to think we have the last year's numbers, don't we? So just for comparison sake of what happened last year, I believe for 24, okay, where it was. Sorry about this. Oh yes, here we go, right here. So this is 24, right? So for 24, this is, very similar sort of thing. We were projecting a deficit of 3.59 million. So overall, the sort of deficits on this particular forecast are significantly lower than what we have in the past sort of forecasted for with regards to going on out. So just a couple of final notes. Natick does remain a financially stable town, and actually I think we're doing very good. We're very optimistic with regards to where our economy is going and how we're doing. We do have some challenges here. I did put possible recession. Unfortunately, that continues to be a reality, which we do have to face. One of the reasons why we do actually emphasize what our stabilization funds are. We are still maintaining that structural deficit. We have done a lot to sort of work our way around that. I do hope that over the coming years we will also do some work on reducing that, but it still remains a reality for us. A reliance on one-time revenues, we talked about that a lot, capital needs, growing debt, especially amongst our enterprise funds, and growing staff costs, and then of course pension and OPEB obligations. We'll note that this of course goes to 2029. Our pension funds are scheduled to be fully funded in 2030. So we are sort of approaching that area, which we'll have some important decisions to make with regards to what we're going to be doing with that money that we have been putting forward towards the pension. We continue to have a very strong residential tax base. Commercial has also been surprisingly strong as well. Mr. Henderson and his crew have been working very diligently on values, and I should like to bring him back with us when we hit the first quarter financials and have him just talk a little bit about the values and what he's seeing with regards to what the market is here in Natick. We do maintain our diverse revenue streams. We do have a very low tax rate. We do have a lower tax rate than a lot of our neighbors, which is a benefit for us. We did maintain our AAA credit rating, both from S&P and Fitch. Conservative, stable, and budgetary performances, and of course, strong management with conservative financial management policies help out with regards to maintaining our economic status. So thank you very much for listening. We will, of course, be back with regards to other updates as we move through the year, but always happy if you have questions. Feel free to call either myself or one of my staff. Always happy to talk to you with regards to financial matters in the town. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Townsend. That was tremendous. I'll wait till Catherine stops sneezing, because I know she said she had a lot of questions. Unless you
Thank you, Bruce. Yes, for calling it out.
Sorry.
So,
I was trying to be cordial, but backfired.
yeah. Thank you, Mr. Evans. With regard to the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund, we finished fiscal 2023 with a $5 million more in revenue than we did in expenses, but we're still forecasting it to be, the debt ratio is above the ideal range. And it looks like it's, referring back to the previous presentation, page 16,
Yep.
and it looks like that's not, that it doesn't look well for that fund. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
So I'm not going to say it doesn't look well for the fund, but so one of the issues, of course, when you're talking about water and sewer is that it does have both the ability to raise fees, which will help it with regards to that particular ratio. One of the things about their ratio and the way it was sort of calculated out is we have been working with a consultant with regards to our fees, so we have a fairly decent idea about how it is we can sort of pitch the fees in order to adjust that somewhat. Now, we, of course, we're supposed to be moderately conservative with regards to our projections here. Take the sort of lower road with regards to our fees and the structure on the fees in order to do those sort of projections. So there are a number of different things as you folks, as your water and sewer commissioners, will have to deal with regards to the fees here that will allow us to deal partly with that particular issue. Unfortunately, the concern that I have is that, given where we are currently with this and where we're going to have to go, the town is basically going to have to step in and help out with regards to making certain that they are not so loaded down with debt that they can't appropriately function. So it actually was a very good sign that for 23, they did have a good, decent sort of positive revenue flows, and they will have a decent retained earnings in order to get them started on what is going to be a couple of difficult years for water and sewer as they sort of deal with the PFAS issues. Obviously, you heard from Mr. Spratt. They have an excellent plan with regards to that. Moving forward, it says that we will have to sort of work on making certain that we are adequately funding that going forward.
Thank you. That's all I have.
If I can just add briefly to the PFAS question, not to go too down a road here because we're really talking about forecasting and what have you, but even on the general government side, a lot of what we don't have the ability to forecast is potential federal and state grants or funds that might come. So we have to assume that we don't have those available to us, except for example, the revenue side, like a state aid that is a little bit more predictable. We're hopeful, especially when it comes to PFAS, but also some of our other new initiatives or even some of our capital programs, that we can continue to be successful at getting grant funds to cover those. Good example is just the recent $2+ million grant that we got from the Department of Energy for the replacement of the entire system at Benham, heating and cooling system. There's more funding coming out from the federal government right now that we're going to work hard to try to tap and be successful. In that case, we were one of 24 school districts of the over 1,000 that applied in the country. So we're hopeful that we can use that momentum and see if we can continue to be that successful with other grants. But it's really hard to forecast from that perspective, both in the water sewer side, but also on the general government side.
Thank you for that, Mr. Joseph.
Thank you. And it kind of dovetails with that comment about the grant that we just received, that $2 million grant. One of the concerns, I guess, was employee costs going up. Obviously, the benefits being a big factor there. To what extent are you forecasting or anticipating the inability to fill positions? My concern is we might be seeing some artificial bump up in our situation today because we haven't been able to fill positions. And what's the anticipation moving forward in terms of availability of talent, and for a reminder of the public, that talent is what applies for these grants?
True. I don't know if, John, you have a
I will just
question on that.
Yeah, so in trying to forecast this, it has been very difficult, because when you take a look at what happened to us over the COVID years, we had some difficulties filling positions, getting people on board. So one of the things generally speaking, am Mr. Doom and Gloom, and I do have to take a conservative view towards things, but in doing the forecast, we are sort of hopeful with regards to going back towards our more normal FY 17, 18, that sort of area where, yes, we had concerns about this, but it was nowhere near what the problem is currently. So in looking at, or in projecting it out, we have a fairly extensive discussion about where do we sort of pitch that? Do we sort of move things back a little bit in order to get what we feel is a little more realistic view, or do we actually include these time when we had difficulties with this, so we did push it back some. So when you take a look at the forecast, it probably is from your point with regards to having to hire people and paying sort of a premium price and those sort of things. Hopefully that is going to go more towards stabilizing going forward, because if indeed we don't have, and then of course when we sit down with the unions and talk about them, civil service, all those particular issues that will help us out, hopefully dealing with some of these issues, we have, and this is something that I can't, of course, forecast, but yes, we have issues with regards to how we're going to deal with some of these issues going forward, which hopefully will sort of ameliorate those particular concerns we have, and the forecast will be more accurate because we are going back to the past a little bit, and it won't be as dire as if we said, look, we're going to be sort of stuck in 2021 and 2022 for the next 10 years.
I'll just add to that department heads, including John and his team, this John and that team, school department, we're all looking at this problem of, I guess less a problem, but more sort of an industry-wide challenge of labor. And how do we get labor in? But that's also causing us to then look at our systems to see how we can create efficiencies, how we can ensure that we're utilizing the resources that we do have in the most appropriate ways possible. So, and that's across the organization. We're looking at implementing more of, for example, in the finance division, more of the Munis software, so that we can, with the same number of people, do more of the work that we need to be doing, be more efficient. Same with public works, same with police and fire. Are just trying to figure that out. And it's not unique to Natick, but it's something that we are working to be at the forefront of.
And do we do any either exit interviews or just benchmarking in terms of our salaries and how competitive we are? I know the Personnel Board does some of this work when they're setting bands.
All of the above,
yeah. Right. But what's the general sense of where we are as an employer of choice based on critical hiring factors? How much does salary weigh in? How much is work balance?
So this is also one of the unique things that came out of the pandemic, because we're constantly doing exit interviews. We are also constantly doing salary surveys. We usually chunk off a quarter to a third of non-union personnel on the town side, and the school department is doing it on the school side with regards to their union contracts. And we are also doing it within our union contracts as well, just to ensure we're competitive with the market. We still have a little ways to go, I would say. Part of it is job specific, meaning some jobs we're right at where we should be, and we have been successful at filling those. Other jobs, we know we have to do more, but we want to know where do we need to go, and how do we ensure that we're not overshooting the market either, because we obviously need to be prudent with the taxpayers' dollars. But every year we usually look at about a quarter to a third of our non-union staff and do a salary comparison survey, so that we know where we are. And then the Personnel Board just help us out with our compression surveys with regards across the organization to make sure we're also comparable across the organization. And we use our review process internally to make sure that we can make adjustments as necessary to specific positions or industries. Sometimes we do notice, though, that especially where we have competition in the private sector, we need to be more competitive just to get people in the door. And we've had to make adjustments, and I've talked to a lot of my counterparts, and they're feeling the same thing. Had to make adjustments that might not even show up in the data. It's just the reality of that position or that industry. Like IT is a very big challenging one, just because we're an IT center in Boston, so we have to be competitive in that sense.
Right. So, but as an employer of choice, we're competitive by salary, we're competitive by work environment as well. I mean, what I'm hearing is we're going to be looking to get good people in here to eventually arm them with more, to do more with less on our behalves.
In a way, yeah.
And, yeah. Good summary. Yeah, no, it's important. But again, this is more of a shout out.
We are also looking at the benefits package. So
Sure.
Not necessarily the monetary benefits package, but what additional things can we do to encourage or incentivize, sort of the work-life balance. And we need to be cognizant that we're a full-service community with a breadth of jobs. We can't necessarily just go across the board work from home like some industries can, for example, because you can't do some of our jobs work from home. You can't do public safety, you can't do library, you can't do DPW from home, at least not most of the functions in those capacities. But we're looking at what can we do, and it might be job specific or department specific, but we are looking at that.
So thank you. Just the last 10 seconds. I very much appreciate what you've been doing as an administrator with your 2 deputies and the departments being able to look at this, but also include staff in some of these innovations and consolidations of efforts and resources. So again, I think the public is very well served by this, and I think you're building an expectation moving forward. So while we're getting financial forecasts here, a big part of our future is the people that we're trying to bring in. And I really appreciate that those go hand in hand. And you look at a spreadsheet, but my son is a spreadsheet guy, and I always told him it's the stuff that informs the spreadsheet that matters most, and it comes back to people. So it's really important, and I really appreciate the work you're all doing with what you've got to work with. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Erickson, I was wondering if you could share, you've talked about compensation and benefits, work-life balance, other things to make Natick an attractive place to work. Can you share some of the feedback you've received either from candidates or from people who are leaving about why Natick is not a desirable place? And is there some other way we can be thinking about supporting our staff?
Sure, absolutely. And all of this is anecdotal. None of it's necessarily scientific, but a lot of it is just from what. So we do regular interviews. A lot of times from the exit interview process, what at least I've heard through our HR department, and it's all, we try to make sure that it's as much anonymous as possible, so it's not as if it's plagued to, or not plagued, it's tied to any one individual. A lot of it relates to sort of the public sector work, meaning there's less flexibility that we can provide in the public sector because we're providing a service to the community. And so an individual might just want the flexibility that a private sector job can provide, whether it's a work from home environment, whether it's just some of the other benefits that come with a private sector job that we know we're having challenges to compete with, and we're trying to make flexibility in some ways, but there's a limitation to what we can do. What we've heard a lot about, even from internal advancements, when it comes to some people that we really want to try to advance in the organization is, and we've even heard this from candidates who choose not to take a job, is just the sheer volume of, I'll just be blunt, night meetings. And having to go to something, for example, like town meeting. I've actually had people say, no, I don't want to be a department head because I don't want to go to town meeting. And I don't want to deal with having that obligation because it impacts work-life balance. And that's a big thing, especially for new generations coming in, that they don't want to have to deal with 2, 3, 4 night meetings a week. They don't want to have to, on top of during two seasons a year where you have 2 night meetings for a town meeting a week, then you also have your other regular committee meetings. That has, I think it's going to continue to be a potential challenge for recruitment and upward mobility of some people internally. Another challenge that we've heard of is related to some of its compensation. Part of it is because of the way we're a heavy union environment, and that's just a legacy problem, not a problem. It's just a legacy component that we need to be mindful of. Some of like our ability as town administration to be flexible with individual employees is limited by what's in a union contract. So we might want to do something or incentivize something, but sorry, our hands are tied. The union contract says X, and there's a valid reason for that. I'm not trying to discount the benefit of a negotiated contract like that, but it's something that has come up. I think people coming into a union environment might not recognize what that means and how it could impact that job or themselves. And the flip side, there's a lot of people that strive to be in the union environment, so it's a balance. And some of it has, quite frankly, just been industry shifts. Like, for example, it's very challenging for us to recruit and hire for some of our public safety positions and DPW positions because people are no longer going into them, and or because this region is so expensive. People can't afford to live here and be in those professions.
Yes.
So we're getting a lot more people apply from as far away as like Springfield, Mass, or just other parts west. Or people are moving, they work here and they're moving west, and then they're leaving us to go to a job closer to where they can afford to live. That's also been a pretty big impact. And so we're getting a lot more people that are commuting an hour and a half to their job. And after a while, that gets draining. You know, somebody who used to commute 2 hours to a job, I did that for 3 years, and I was like, nope, not anymore. And I moved. It wasn't because I didn't like the job, and it wasn't about money, and it wasn't about the benefits I had in that job. It was because I needed to be closer to home with my job.
I really appreciate those. I know that they're anecdotal and not statistical, but it's helpful to get a bigger picture of the challenges the town faces in hiring and retaining top talent.
If I could just add a piece, I know the night meetings was something that came up and, potentially town meeting. I don't think in talking to some of the employees that are here and some of the ones that have moved on, I don't think it's necessarily the fact that they don't want to be there to present information to the public. I think sometimes they get stuck in meetings that they don't need to be at, or they get stuck for long periods of time, either at the front or the end of a meeting. So I think trying to be respectful of their time so that we can get them in and out, because they also have a life that they have to move on to. And a lot of these employees that are at these meetings are at other meetings, and at other events and in here on weekends and things like that. So I just think it's an important component that we have to be mindful of when we go forward and try to find opportunities to get them in and out as quickly as we can so that they can, get back to their families and the other pieces that they need. So.
That's a great point. It isn't just the fact that you had to be at a meeting. It's the efficiency of those meetings, and sometimes process for the sake of process rather than process for something more meaningful. So, John, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I'm good.
As we're keeping him here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Townsend.
Thank you.
And your whole team.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump on the ditto train.
Anything else? All right, I'm
Just a thank you.
Yeah, I'm on
Yeah,
the
thank
thank you ditto train. This is, again, an excellent presentation and answered a lot of our questions, and I'm, again, encouraged. I was, when you see the red numbers and you sort of start to hit the panic button, so I appreciate you providing the context of where we've been previously and how once the rubber hits the road is usually, quite a bit over that forecast, because we do intentionally forecast conservatively. So,
Correct, yeah.
so that's great work.
Thank you.
Look forward to your next update.
Thank you.
We'll be back.
Okay.
Thank you, Jan.
We won't keep you any longer because we want to
To
retain
go
you.
home, yes.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Tian. Just kudos to the team. This was a really, I think we've learned a lot during the pandemic, and it seems like every 6 months we're learning even more about what is happening in the world today. I think pre-pandemic it was a little bit more, we're going through the motions, and now I feel like we have a really strong understanding as to not where we're going in the next 6 months, but just a better understanding as to where we've been and where we need to go. Yeah. So thank you to the team.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And managing that uncertainty. I mean, that's just tremendous.
Yeah, it's the world changing under your feet. Yeah.
I will say, if I may, if I can beg the indulgence of the board for a second, I was at an event Mass Econ hosted this morning at Babson College. It was focused on the workforce of Massachusetts. So they had a bunch of speakers, a couple of panels, a couple of interesting private sector techniques for benefits of keeping people is paying for their education. We talk about lifelong learning now, but now is becoming continuous learning. So the trends are changing, but as a community, we should really be thinking about these opportunities. And as a state, can we partner with the UMass system now that community college is free for everybody? Can we think creatively about providing bachelor's and master's degrees for our employees? And the idea being we pay for it, but we're guaranteed to get their services and their wisdom for the next few years. And if they choose to move on, they pay for that education. So it's really low risk to the public, and a great opportunity for us for retaining. And there are a couple of other ideas that came up like that I hope we do consider and we think about, because I do think the next 5 years in particular are going to be very transformative in terms of the talent and sort of how we structure talent contracts.
Thank you for that. That's
I'm not going to, I agree with that. We absolutely work to try to encourage our teams to continue their education in whatever way they can. We have some incentive programs for that as well. I think they can be more robust, but it's just something that we can absolutely look at. We do have a very brief capital if the board wants to be indulged with that, or,
Could we take a quick break?
sure.
5-minute break. Sorry to keep you 5 minutes longer, Jim.
It's all right, I'll be here.
So we'll be in recess for 5 minutes?
There we go. Mr. Marshall, take us through the Capitol, please.
Thank you, members of the board. So in your packet this evening, and actually might be under the next heading, you have all of the capital items for fall of fiscal year 25. There's a total of 21 items that we'll be requesting to move forward at fall town meeting. I'm just going to give you a really high-level overview in terms of some of the changes that have happened since the capital improvement program was released in January of this year. So the big changes are we're taking 6 of the items that we had planned for fiscal year 24 and we're deferring them. We're deferring them for a couple of reasons. One, they might be multi-year requests and we might still be working on a prior phase, or it might be something that just timing-wise we're not ready to move forward with, looking at the next 6 months until when we'll be back at Capitol. 4 of those items we are also going to be reducing. So in terms of total dollars that we needed for that, we'll be dropping those dollars down. 2 of the items we're eliminating. The reason we are eliminating the items is they belong in the operating budget, and for a couple of years we've had them in the capital budget. So we're moving those back to the location of where they belong. We have one project that we received grant funding for, so we no longer need town meeting for the appropriation for that. And then we have 3 items that we added this year. And I'm going to just talk about those 3 items that we'll be bringing forward. And again, you have all this material in your packet this evening, so if you have any specific questions on the items, I'm happy to dive deeper into them. But I do just want to talk about those 3 items that we're looking at adding. One is $150,000 for engineering and design for a water booster station. We had talked about the connection that the town is looking to make to the MWRA. This $150,000 will give us the design work to create a booster station, which will allow us to draw the water from the MWRA into our water system. So the design work is kind of that first piece in that process. The next item is taser replacements related to our police department. So one of the things that we've run into is the prior tasers that we've had. Unfortunately, they've reached end of useful life and they're no longer manufacturing those. So prior, we were able to get replacement parts. We were able to send them in. However, because they're no longer manufacturing them, we can only get parts that have already been produced. So we're starting to run into an issue with that, and it's one of those pieces that it's super important. It's our least lethal kind of action that we can take if we run into a situation where we need to use certain force. So we want to make sure that we can update those and get those in the hands of our uniformed officers. And then the last addition is for defibrillator replacements. We have about 20 units that we need to have replaced due to batteries no longer being able to hold charges for a long period of time. So we're still able to charge them. However, as they're losing that charge, we want to be mindful of that and make sure we replace it in a timely fashion. So those are the 3 adds into the program. Everything else that is moving forward in the fall was in the capital improvement plan. So happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Ms. Coffin.
I noticed that the, the street acceptance plan preparation budget is being reduced from $150,000 to $50,000. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure. So that's due to prior appropriation that we have in previous years. So we still have about $60,000 remaining. As part of the street acceptance work, we need about $10,000 per road to do survey work to move forward with that. So we feel that with the money that we had prior, plus any new requests that might come in, that will give us the ability to get through about 10 roads. And that will give us, then we can assess and evaluate as we're going into spring. There's a lot of requests that might be out there, or there's a lot of feedback we've certainly heard on the roads. However, based on what we anticipate coming in within that window of time, this should get us through what we need to.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall.
Any other questions? I think I've got one, which is, what did I do? Oh, it had to do with the defibrillators. Does that cover, what percentage of defibrillators in the town does that cover? Does that cover the school, the fire department?
Good question. So these are mainly related to police and fire in terms of those units within their vehicles and equipment that go out and get deployed. It's not related to school buildings or other town buildings. I think there might be a couple within that request that is tied to the public safety buildings, but I don't believe related to the other buildings.
Okay. And the last question that I have is regarding the fast electric vehicle charging stations. And you have it labeled as defer, grant, or combine. And you have it as a 0 right now. And I'm assuming that they're going to be, and maybe you can disabuse me of that if it's incorrect, that there are going to be a lot of grants available to put in these high-speed charging stations. So if you could comment briefly on that.
Sure. So one of the things that we are looking to do in a different article is establish a revolving fund for grants and other opportunities and incentives that are out there that weren't accessible before. We do have one request on for the fall for some energy efficiency upgrades. This will probably be the last time that we ask for it through the kind of capital means, but we had both of these requests on for the fall, and based on kind of the window of time that we need to still move forward with some of our efforts before that revolving fund will be able to authorize and start drawing from it, this we felt was appropriate.
Excellent. Any other questions from the board? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Marshall.
You're welcome.
All right, let's move along to I'm going to go a little bit out of order if it's okay with, it's kind of out of order. I know that we have Ms. Monahan, who has little ones at home and probably wants to do her Article 32 if she would be ready to present at this time. I welcome her to the podium.
Hi, am I unmuted? Can you hear me?
You are fine. We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I tried to share my video. It didn't work. Guess what, everybody? I have COVID. This is the worst. Yeah. I'm thankful that the select board is here to listen on Article 32 tonight, which I submitted to town meeting for this fall as a citizen petition. I don't really have a presentation or anything for you. I think you probably got my email with the FinCom questionnaire for the article.
Yep.
The 2-minute version is that in 2018, Massachusetts passed laws to provide paid family medical leave to employees in the Commonwealth. And part of that law exempted municipal employers from participating unless they made a local adoption of the law. And so here we are in 2023, and the way for Natick to locally adopt this law would be to accept the bylaw at town meeting. So that's what I've submitted. If you don't work for a municipal employer and you've been working since 2019, you've probably seen the Massachusetts paid family medical leave deductions on your pay stub. If you haven't noticed them, it's because they're pretty small. It's about 0.3% tax on Massachusetts taxable wages contributed by the employees, and an equal employer contribution. So for the town of Natick, that would be something like, up to, I think the total price would be $600,000 per year would be the town's tax liability. So whether that comes entirely from the town's budget or you figure out a way to implement the payroll withholding that private employers have been doing since then to break it up. Yeah, it's a great program. Like, it provides 12 to 26 weeks of paid leave for, the things you might imagine. If you need surgery, if someone in your family has a serious illness, if you have a new child coming into your family. And the cost, I want to be clear, this is a withholding tax, but the payment of any benefits does not happen through the town of Natick. The town would just begin to participate in the existing Commonwealth of Massachusetts paid family medical leave program. So this does not take away from any existing paid leave benefits that town employees might have. This just starts that withholding and then enables them access to apply for paid family medical leave. And the state would determine whether or not they qualify, how much money they would get for paid leave, and the state would pay out those benefits. So there's no need for the town of Natick to be paying that. I did look at all of the different collective bargaining agreements and kind of tried to see who was covered in different situations that might benefit from this kind of coverage of the town being part of PFML. Almost none of the employees and none of the CBAs have paid parental leave, except for the main teachers union. They have 8 weeks of paid parental leave, which is great, and that would not be in any way, impacted by a positive action on my article, except for the fact that the town of Natick could be reimbursed for whatever they've paid in that parental leave. Because employers are allowed, if they have a similar program to what the state PFML is, they're allowed to apply for reimbursement of those funds. And similarly, a few of the CBAs have a 5-day administrative paid leave to care for a family member. The town could also apply for reimbursement of those if they were participating in this program. I'm going to stop talking now. But if anyone wants to ask a question, I welcome them. And yeah, thank you guys for hearing this tonight.
Questions? Board? Ms. Coughlin?
Ms. Monahan, have you talked to any other communities? I'm thinking primarily of Cambridge or Somerville or Amherst or Northampton, ones that are very progressive communities, to find out why they have not adopted this or why no other community has adopted this yet?
I just today got an email in with someone in Somerville that's on like their working group for this. But no, I mean, my time is limited. I haven't found out why I'm focusing mostly on why Natick hasn't done it. And yeah, finding out, I have also heard that Springfield, the city of Springfield has, I think, a subcommittee that's exploring this or like doing some research into it. But no, I haven't heard from other communities.
I'm just curious. I raised this question during FinCom, and I am extraordinarily sympathetic with what I believe you want the outcome to be. There are people in our town who are employed that don't have the same sort of support for short-term disability or parental leave that maybe other employees might. I'm very concerned about the collective bargaining units. There are collective bargaining units in town that will require the town to go into impact bargaining, which is very expensive, in which case it's probably best for the town to just go ahead and pay both the employee and the employer portions, simply because of the cost and time involved in impact bargaining. We do have 15 unions, 10 that this board would be, or the town administrator would negotiate, and that this board would approve. That's my only concern, and what I'd like to do is maybe have a really good sense of who does not have, how many employees do not have access to this, and how can we meet this need without adopting the state statute, which then would trigger impact bargaining with the unions.
May I just ask you to, for our audience, to define what you mean by impact borrowing?
Oh, yes, I'm
Most of
sorry.
us
Yes, of
understand
course,
it, but-
Mr. Evans. So when a collective bargaining agreement has already been negotiated and a new benefit becomes available, or the town requires a unit covered by a collective bargaining agreement to do additional duties. So, for example, during the height of the opioid crisis, the town asked the police department to carry Narcan. Carrying Narcan triggered an event where the town and the unions needed to assess what the impact of that new assignment would be on the officers and determine whether or not it would allow them to have additional compensation for that. So that's an example. Or another one might be if a benefit becomes available to the entire town but is not specifically covered under a collective bargaining agreement, the unions would ask for impact bargaining to see how they could add that benefit to their agreement. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Thank you. That was a very good point. I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.
That is a question I have. Thank you, Kat, for this presentation and for the article. How many employees, how many town employees would be impacted by this?
Every single town employee would be impacted by this. And when I say every single, I mean seasonal, part-time, full-time. If the question that's being asked is who would get access to a benefit that they don't currently have now, the answer changes a little bit because of just the way the state program works. But as I mentioned, there is one unit, one CBA, the teachers, which is about 490 people, according to an email I got from the Natick Public Schools HR person. Actually, it's also the administrators. Yeah, let's say 500 people have 8 weeks of parental leave that they're entitled to, which is one part of the state program. The state program can cover 12 to 26 weeks of paid leave. And similarly, the school bargaining units have 5 days of administrative paid leave that they can use to care for a family member. The state program is also 12 to 26 paid weeks. So yeah, that's a longer version of the same answer. Oh, yeah, Frank.
Okay.
It's up to you.
Another follow-up question.
Go ahead, Ms. Campbell.
When it says 12 to 26, what does that mean? Does it mean 12 full-time coverage?
Yeah, so 12 weeks, it's similar to FMLA, where FMLA, like if you're approved for FMLA, it's a pretty standard 12-week period. It's just that it's paid. That's the select board. And 26 would be an employee applies for an extension, and it's either approved or denied, again, by the state program, not Natick. And so the amount that they are being paid is calculated based on prior wages reported to the PFML program.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Erickson, would you like to comment?
Sure, and I first want to thank Kat for the explanation. I nodded my head throughout. If you didn't see me, I was saying, yep, I agree with everything that you've been saying, and I appreciate Ms. Monahan. She and I met a couple weeks ago now, and just to talk through this, and it educated me on the program. I have also not necessarily reached out to my colleagues to see why other communities have not adopted this, so I don't think I can answer that question any better than Kat has. But I did provide a memo, and this memo also went to the board. It went to the sponsor. It reiterated a lot of what has been discussed tonight. One of the things that I just want to highlight in that is the potential costs for budgeting purposes. I would probably put it at $600,000 to $700,000 for the reasons that were discussed tonight with regards to how the cost might be incurred by the town for various reasons, contract negotiations, just other considerations with regards to that. Another big question is that we do have various programs offered through our union collective bargaining contracts for different versions of paid leave. We also have a fairly lucrative sick time program that the private sector companies typically don't have. So, for example, non-union personnel, but this is standard even with our union contracts, we provide not only vacation time but also sick time, and that can be built up over time. So employees that have worked here for a number of years tend to have several days, if not I think the max on the town non-union side is upwards of 100 days of accrued time that can be saved, and that can be used for very similar type benefits. It's just something to be mindful of, because I think the private sector is a bit different in that sense than the public sector. And one just policy question that I know I've talked through with the sponsor, as well as just with my team in the HR department, as well as the school HR department, is identifying where we currently have gaps in our offerings that this might fill, and are there other ways we can fill those gaps, utilizing the funds that might go towards something like this for that might maybe even offer similar or better benefits. I just don't know enough about the what we're working to, what this particular program, if adopted, would add to our offerings. And I just want, I would, from the town administration side and the HR side, when we look at new programs and offerings, we always try to say, what are we trying to solve? What are we trying to offer? Are we hearing from our employees that we're not providing something? In the case of this type of program, we haven't heard a ton from our employees, part-time otherwise. I think maybe once or twice a year we do hear through some new hires that might have like a child on the way. Do I get paid leave? We work with, we've encouraged them to utilize some of our short-term care options, like short-term benefit options that is employee paid. There isn't a town match presently, but they're negotiated at group rates, so they are favorable, and they tend to offer very, very good programs, like usually a higher return on the short-term amount of pay based on their average salary than what we understand this program offers. It's not to say there aren't benefits with this program, it's just to say that the policy question comes into play about what the issue is that we're working to solve, and is this the best program to do that?
Yeah.
I can answer any questions in my memo. It's on Novus, and it was provided to the sponsor as well as the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Mr. Sidney.
Yeah, and just to kind of summarize what I think I'm hearing, It sounds like we should do some analysis, and then if this is the right solution, bring it back, would be the right way to approach this, rather than try to pass it at this town meeting. Would that be a fair statement, Mr. Erickson?
My preference is always to understand what is that we're working to solve and come up with a program that's the best program for what we're trying to solve. I'm not sure I'm comfortable at this time. If somebody said, is this the right program for us? I can't say yes. I can't say no, but I can't say yes. So from that perspective, correct. I would recommend, it's probably why folks like Springfield or other communities have a working group to study this, is likely because they're trying to figure out what is this going to provide us above and beyond what we currently provide, and is this the best approach for us to provide. We have the flexibility under the law to either adopt this or do our own thing if we're trying to provide something similar.
Any other questions?
Not a question, but just for the public's benefit, when you talk about the questionnaire that's listed on Novus, it's noted as Article 31, but that actually speaks to 32.
32, yeah.
So just there's a little confusion there, but that is the substance of 32.
Yeah, good cut.
Mm-hmm.
That's just in the title
Correct.
on Novus, not the actual file
Right,
name.
the
but
file
we can
is
change
there.
that. Yep.
Yeah.
Just didn't want people to be steered away.
Yeah. Thank you.
And no
Mr.
questions for me. Thank you.
Okay. Any others? No. Thank you, Ms. Monahan. I look forward to hearing more discussion on this topic. As you can see, that we do consider this as something that we need to investigate and figure out what the best approach is. I think Mr. Erickson summed it up properly, which is what's the problem we're trying to solve with this program, and there are often multiple ways to do this, and we need to work out what the most efficient and effective approach is. So I look forward to the discussion at town meeting.
And feel better.
So, yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, feel better.
Hope you feel better. All I can offer is condolences because I've had COVID and it feels pretty awful.
Yeah.
So I hope you feel better sooner rather than later.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Good night. Okay, I'm going to do a little more swapping, which is prior to discussing the fall annual town meeting articles or further discussion, I'd like to, since people from the Salwin House Committee are here and have been patiently waiting, I'd like to go to that topic next. So just to tee this up, when we last discussed this, we had heard about the what has been happening over the last, I'll call it a couple years in this Salwin House, and what, more importantly, what hasn't happened. So I put together a document that I'd like to read. It's unfortunately pretty long, but I'd like to sort of put that out there so that we can discuss where we go as next steps as a board. So this is from James Fries, who was the former Community and Economic Development Director. So prior to his departure in August 2021, James Fries put together an excellent memo that identified the issues associated with the town taking ownership of Salwin House. And I quote, "Essentially, the memo calls for the Select Board to make a preliminary decision relative to acquisition of the Salwin House based on the broad outlines of the agreement as it stands right now. While there are certainly details to be addressed, broadly speaking, we know enough about the costs and what we as the town are getting for these costs for the Select Board to make a preliminary decision." The memo, he goes on to say, the memo provides an excellent cost-benefit analysis and identifies a number of issues and steps that need to be considered. Number one, the viability of any agreement to preserve the Salwin House on the Broadmoor property depends on the town taking ownership of the building to ensure that the terms of any agreement are met and that the building is safely maintained. Operations and day-to-day oversight of the building can be designated to another entity, but the town must own the structure. Costs. There are immediate obligations, separate water and sewer service from the Mass Audubon's maintenance building, building stabilization, restoration, and other improvements that was estimated at approximately $300,000 in 2021. Advocates for preservation believe this cost could be funded through a grant from Massachusetts Historical Council. MHC is not making any grants and hasn't since 2019. And we're not sure. This was based on some research that we did as a board. They're not making any grants since 2019, so we're not sure what, if anything, is allocated in FY24. They generally cap these grants also at $100,000 and require 50% matching funds according to info on their website. After stabilization, allowing public visitation will require the construction of a parking lot with an estimated cost of $120,000. So we're looking at a ballpark estimate of $500,000 for near-term obligations. These costs may have changed since this memo was written. And then there are ongoing costs, which the draft agreement required the town to maintain liability insurance, property insurance, and workman's compensation insurance. And the estimate for that was roughly $3,500. And that too may require an update. Obviously, the benefits to moving ahead with this is the town preserves the historic asset with limited rights of public visitation. According to the prior draft contract, it was 2 days per month and limited by the occupation of the occupancy of the parking lot. The clear intent is for the site to be used for educational and historic interpretation purposes related to the history of Salwin House and not a major program space or event location. One could imagine historians and other researchers visiting the site for educational gatherings of students and adults sponsored by the Natick Historical Society. So this part is not part of the memo, but is my opinion only. And I'd like to use it as a starting point for discussion. To this point, the Select Board has not made the preliminary decision to move ahead, and in my opinion, will not do so until the following milestones are met. Formation of the 501c3 to act as a pass-through for the town to enter an agreement to own the rights of the Salwin House. Shift complete responsibility for all costs associated with historic preservation and ongoing maintenance to the 501c3. Formation documents of the 501c3 subject to town council approval. Next, to provide information on the funding model for the 501c3 to the Select Board, including a detailed list of potential grant sources, average grants given in the past years for similar type items. Next, to reach the milestone of 50% of funding pledges for the 501c3, that would be half of that estimated $500,000. And to provide an accounting of all monies approved by town meeting previously. Once these milestones are achieved, the board can consider making a preliminary decision to move ahead with negotiations with Mass Audubon and the 501c3 and negotiate an agreement between the 501c3 and the town of Natick. So those are my thoughts on this. So I want to open it up to the board first.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. The $500,000 is not the purchase price of the building. It's the costs we would incur once we actually own the building.
Right. We are not purchasing the building. We are purchasing the right to preserve it and allow visitation there. So we will not be the owner of the building. Mass Audubon will continue to be the owner.
Okay. All right, I just wanted to understand that.
But the town will be responsible for procuring liability insurance for any and all events that would happen?
At the present time, yes.
I mean, you're foreseeing that as a condition of an agreement?
Right. That is a detail that would have to be worked out in the 501c3 town of Natick. Essentially, Natick, and maybe I should back up a level or bring it up a level, which is Mass Audubon will only their historic position has been that they will only work with the town of Natick as an entity. And what the town of Natick does after that is on the town of Natick. Now, to us, or to me, that's a little one-sided, and we need to sort of work out what happens. Say, for the sake of argument, this 501c3 does not get the funding that's requisite to do that. What is our recourse as a town? Now that we've worked out an agreement with Mass Audubon, what is our recourse if the back end to support this isn't there? I don't believe, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting, that the town wants to own the building and wants to maintain the building. They don't have the resources, they don't have the budget. So I think that would have to be, that would be a point that would need to get hammered at. And that's one of the three cost areas that I would say are identified. Mr. Sidney.
It seems to me, I remember at our last discussion of this, that, and I may be misremembering, so, but it seems like because of changes over at Audubon, they might be willing to sell the town the building, but not the land, which is, of course, a little complicated in and of itself.
Yeah.
And so,
Let me stop you there and answer the question that I think you are asking, which is, you're right. The Mass Audubon would retain the property, and the town would pass through that building, right? We wouldn't technically be owners of that building for the brief period of time before we transfer it to a 501c3, right? We wouldn't.
I don't think, so this is a nuance that I think needs to be rehashed out with Mass Audubon.
right, this is where I was going.
And my understanding, and this is true with really all the stuff that is in that memo from James Freese back 2+ years ago now, is this was all pre-negotiated. I don't know where the current leadership at Mass Audubon or the Broadmoor are going to be on some of these conditions or all of these conditions. They might say, yep, that's still on the plate, or they might say, actually, this is now our new condition. At that time, my understanding was that the town had to still retain the ownership of the building. We would just need, my recommendation is that the town should defer all of the costs to a nonprofit, or as much of the costs as possible to a nonprofit, and then also have a similar reversion clause, meaning if the nonprofit is not able to do that work, then it would revert back to Mass Audubon ownership, so that the town limits its liability in this case.
Thank you.
I don't know if, again, these are the terms that present-day Mass Audubon might be willing to accept, though.
And did we have an idea, I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
Did we have an idea, because we're talking 500,000 just to get the site stable, assuming we own the building, and whether that's paid by a 501c3 or somebody else's, like, not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
But somebody has to come up with the purchase cost that we would pay Audubon. I don't imagine they would give us the building. We'd probably have to pay for it. And I wonder if we know what that would be.
No, the actual proposal
Actually,
is
hold
that
on,
they would
Henry.
give it to us.
Henry. Actually, in the prior agreements, it's no cost.
Okay.
So I can't imagine. they're going to change that position, but
Again, I don't know.
we don't know.
Yeah, right. I mean, all this is up in
It's
the air.
not going to be, you know,
Yeah, we'd have to
several
talk to them.
$100,000 or something like that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't underestimating
No, I agree.
these costs, and so, okay, thank you. That clarifies things.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Erickson, for clearing up the property ownership thing, which I was mangling.
Yeah. And even some of the conditions at that time, we would have to, I'm assuming Mass Audubon will want to engage with the town and vice versa to ensure that what was discussed at that time is still everyone's understanding. Meaning, my understanding from just reading the past materials is that there was an intent to allow for educational programs coming there, a parking lot, for example. I don't know if that's still going to be the case. They might say, nope, you can't disturb any of the grounds around this. We let you maintain the building, but it's really just for people who are walking on our property to observe. I don't, they might not want to allow for additional parking at that location, which might be I don't know if, again, these are things that I think we need to work through.
Any thoughts this side?
You've articulated my concerns. So concerns about sustainability of a nonprofit, the use of the funds that the committee has been already allocated by town meeting. We don't have a report on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and you've mentioned everything else.
Okay. Ms. Poe?
I think the last time when we had the update, there was reservations about the steps that probably should be taken first, and it sounds like that memo laid a number of those things out. So I feel like there's still a path forward to whatever that is. It's a clear path, but there's a process that needs to happen.
Yeah, I want to say, I would love to see this go forward, but I think it can't go forward on the town side only. There has to be a concerted citizens effort to create the 501c3, the nonprofit that's going to manage this property, in conjunction with maybe reopening those negotiations with Audubon. So I think it doesn't feel to me like there's a lot of action we can take right now until there's some external steps completed.
Mr. Joseph?
Yeah, I guess
Excuse me.
we've had a lot of discussion about this, and I concur with what you're saying about process, but there's still a lot of unknowns. I mean, can we start with the basics? And I don't know, with the proponents that are here, let's get answers. To me, it starts with let's reach out to Audubon and have a couple of us, whether a rep from the board, rep from the community, go talk to them. Let's start with the baseline of where are we, and then work backwards, because we can talk about hypotheticals and we can refer back a couple of years, but until we know what we're starting with, it seems like
that was my intention.
Yeah,
next
so I mean, I'd like to hear sort of from
Well,
Mr.
I think
Oakland and
the,
Mr. Sullivan.
Is it my turn?
It is, indeed.
I defer to the
All
chair,
right.
but yeah.
Some of you know I have hearing problems, so if I act like I'm not hearing you, I probably don't. I think that the next step that we need to take is to have a conversation with Audubon to find out where they are. The draft agreement that Mr. Freese had exchanged with them has a lot of issues that we have prepared a draft agreement that we think would work. Mr. Erickson has a copy of it. And what we need to do before we do anything else is sit down with them and find out whether we can make an arrangement with them. Now, the current platform agreement, if you will, is that they would sign a quitclaim deed and turn this property over to Natick. Natick would have 4 years to achieve some mutually agreeable level of progress, and if that had not been achieved, we'd give it back to Audubon, and they could go ahead and demolish it. That discussion was arrived at after quite a lot of internal dialogue about what would be an acceptable way to limit risk to the town and limit risk to Mass Audubon. But right now, the thing that we need to know the most about is what would they be willing to consider? And would their terms and conditions be something that would be willing for this board to sign up? The discussion about should we form the 501c3 now or wait till we know whether we're going to have a deal, that's kind of a chicken and egg kind of thing. An organization that would be formed specifically to manage that property under contract from Natick, which would have specific requirements in that contractual agreement for the 501c3 would have to raise all the funding, do all the management and all of that. These arrangements occur around the country in a number of other places, and I think our lawyers can figure out how to make it work. I don't have a big problem saying, all right, we'll get some people together and form the 501c3, spend $400 or $500, and it's done. But we're not going to be able to raise any money from anybody until we can tell people what the money is going to be spent for. We have to know what the agreement's going to look like. We have to know what has to happen to make it effective. And a critical part of the agreement that we have to have with Audubon is accessibility to the house. Now, we don't have to have, people driving up every day and going in and ringing the doorbell and getting a tour, but we have to have 2 to 4 days a month that can be scheduled for educators, schools, whoever might be interested to come in and take a look at the house. There are several things about this house that are really quite interesting. One is that it demonstrates the evolution of construction technology over a long period of time. And one of the things that is not widely recognized about the house is that a major chunk of it, which is a kitchen that was added in the 1690s, is actually considerably older than the house. And that happened because when the deal was done for Thomas Awan to come over here and start building these mills, and by the way, I didn't mention the last time, but that whole deal was organized by a woman named Sarah Awasamug. And if there's really a mother of Natick, it's her, because she put together the deal with Sawin and then helped Sawin implement it. She sold it to the legislature and helped manage it for decades. But while he was building the mill, he needed a place to live. So he built what he called a shack, not too far away from where he ultimately built the house. And he lived in the house, or lived in a shack while he was building the house and building the mills. And then when he got ready to fully occupy the house, they moved the shack down the hill and married it up to the house. There are a number of those kinds of features associated with the house, and a lot of people that are interested in watching how technology changed in terms of the way people design stuff, constructed stuff, find that house pretty interesting. Also, for somebody who was a craftsman, he was not a very good carpenter. So, but that's a whole another subject. But what my suggestion is that is the most effective way for us to move forward is to see if we can have a conversation with Mass Audubon really as soon at the earliest possible time. And if it would help do that, I'll be happy to get with Bill Proya and Steve Evers, and we'll draft a letter for Mr. Erickson maybe to send to his counterpart at Mass Audubon and see if we can get a meeting together for essentially figuring out where we are and what has to happen if we're going to try and reach an amicable agreement. I'm on the schedule to tell town meeting what our status is, and I'd like to be able to report to them that we're making progress. We have a lot of feedback from various people that Audubon is ready to have a serious conversation. My feeling is, all right, let's find out if that's true. And if it is, then figuring out how we put that together is really fairly straightforward, because we actually have to get a final contract that is reviewed by our attorney, by this board, by anybody else that wants to look at it. We have to form the 501c3, and I would think that we would want the 501c3 formed before a contract was signed. I don't think it has to be, I don't think there's any reason to spend the money and form it until we know whether Audubon wants to negotiate. But if they're willing to talk, then we can put something together and start the processes, because the most immediate funding is probably going to come from some of the governmental sources. But there are other people that we can start talking to as soon as we've got something to talk about. And as soon as we can get to that point, I think we can get this kicked off and go make it happen.
Mr. Chair,
long-term risk to Natick, we've done everything we can think of, and everything has been suggested to make sure that the long-term risk is, seriously contained. Yes, there's some expense for the liability insurance. The last time we asked this question, the answer was it's not enough to worry about. Well, anytime I'm told something's not worth worrying about, I've got other things on my plate, I'll move down the road. So I don't know what the answer might be. We should have enough money left in the budget to take care of the power reconnections that would be covered, and the well situation that needs to be changed. Other than that, there really isn't anything that we would expect for Natick to have to stand up and do. If we get involved in doing the parking lot, that's a separate project. We've had that surveyed. We have estimates on it. We know what it would be required. The one obstacle that we ran into is that in order to do the parking lot there, we have to move the gate that's on the street right now, and they didn't want us to do that when we last talked about that. But the proposal was that it would just simply be moved and reduplicated exactly as is. So I think that with your concurrence, the next thing we should do is see if we can get a conversation going with Mass Audubon, probably their president and probably Jamie, if he's willing. And I think we probably ought not to dwell too much on all of the things that happened before that we considered to be negotiating in bad faith, and treat this as kind of a new start. There's new people, and see if we can make something good happen that benefits everybody. So that's my suggestion.
Let me just run something by Mr. Erickson, which is, it strikes me as we need to have a conversation before we talk to Mass Audubon, between Henry, myself, and you, about what we're looking for out of an agreement before we talk to Mass Audubon. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I would, Mr. Evans, I would also put Bill Proya and Steve Evers in that conversation.
All right.
So at our last meeting, I'm sorry, I just want to jump in here. At our last meeting, what we talked about was whether or not we were going to ask staff to invest time in this. So I went ahead and went back through to about 2011 to look at meeting notes from former select board members. There are no minutes from this committee posted. I don't have any report on how money has been spent. I can't find that anywhere. And I'm trying to figure out why this, if this has been worked on for 12 years, why nothing has happened? Why?
It hasn't been. That's probably a misunderstanding. There were two separate projects. The first project was undertaken by the Mass Historical Society, and the proposal there was that they were going to take a part of the Samhain House, relocate it to Shaw Park, and then expand that into a facility that they would use for their office building. That went through a huge amount of controversy.
Yes, I read about that. So let's talk about the most recent.
This project was started on Article 28 in the fall annual town meeting 2017. And the Board of Selectmen and the moderator appointed a committee that started working on discussions with them in 2018. There should be an adequate supply of minutes from 2017, 2018, and up into 2019. In 2019, it got kind of spotty because we were not having regular meetings at that point after COVID kicked in. And we have not had any official meetings really since that time. Now, we've had a lot of discussions about how we can move this forward, things that we need to do. And I think the next step, Mr. Evans has already touched on, and that is that we have kind of a strategy conversation considering Mr. Erickson, Mr. Evans, and those of us in Natick who have had a lot of insight into this problem. And then we can come to some conclusions, go try and have a positive conversation. I mean, the best outcome would be they say, yeah, we'd like to put something together. Let's put this together. We've got a draft. We can go to town meeting and say, hey, we're making progress. At which point, you know, if we feel comfortable that they're really serious, I have no problem starting to try and raise money right then, as long as we know that we've got a live baby. But it's pretty hard to get people to cough up significant amounts of money when everything is speculative.
I agree with that completely. I'm looking at our calendar. We've got town meetings starting on the 17th. And so while we're trying to wrap up articles and have our town staff be prepared with zoning, with all the presentations they need to do and run the town, we're going to ask them to have a meeting between the three of you and then hammer out what it is we think we want. And then we're going to go to Audubon. So that's 2 meetings before town meeting starts. And my first inclination was, let's wait till after town meeting so we can not overburden our staff. And then I thought, oh gosh, then they're going into budget season. So then November and December's budget, January's budget. I'm not saying we don't have time for this. I just want to be very clear about what we're asking our staff to do and how we ask them to spend their time. And I still have this mental block where I can't figure out what's happened since the select board appointed this committee in 2015. I'm reading it right on the internet. It could have been a different project, could have been the house was going to be moved, it's not going to be moved, whatever. But I'm looking at a stack of research on this. All types of conversations have happened. Staff has met with Audubon, staff's met with the committee, staff's met with the select board. Now we're in 2023. And I don't see the sustainability of the project, but that's just my personal take on this.
Well, I think the key thing that we need to do is have a discussion with Audubon about whether they're willing to consider going ahead. Preparation for that has to be a discussion with the appropriate people from the town administration and the select board. And once we get that sorted out, we can have, I don't think there's any chance we would have an agreement, even if they're really willing, by town meeting. I mean.
No, we don't have any room on an agenda.
I would be very happy to be able to tell town meeting that we're making progress, and we're confident that we're going to be able to conclude something.
Mr. Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing all of this, and with absolute due respect to the administration's time, and with due respect to the administration, do we need the administration in this first conversation? This is an issue of what does the community want. We represent their interests. With due respect to the administration, you're our execution arm. You're the CEO of this town. You got an operation to run. Samhain House is not part of that operation. There might be implications of that, but it's, in my opinion, it's not your role necessarily to define what we want from this. How we do things, absolutely. But, you know, again, bringing it back and with, again, deferring your time to more, I think, vital things to the operation, I you know, obviously would not exclude you from it, but it seems to me that this is something we need to decide as a body. And, you know, do we need to formalize this so much before we just go there and say, what are you thinking? I think we're overcomplicating the first conversation, to be honest with you.
Thoughts?
I mean, the big thing for town administration is to understand where does the board want this to go. So I think it's kind of speaking to Paul's point of, I'm hesitant to put too much town staff resource to this until I know what this is and where it's going from the select board perspective. I'm happy to be part of conversations, and I'm happy to help inform conversations. I think there's been a lot of work that was done in the past with James Freese and prior administrations to get to even where it is today. I'll give you my cautions, and I've given some of them tonight, just understanding, like, I know we have a draft agreement from a couple years ago now. Is it still relevant? Is it still worth negotiating moving forward? Is Mass Audubon still willing to be a party? But again, those are all part of an initial conversation with Mass Audubon, but I'm hesitant to necessarily even represent the town until I know what the select board is willing to move forward with.
Okay.
And if I may?
Hold on, no. Let me actually circle back and just say, what does the board feel about that? Because we've heard one opinion that says, yes, go ahead and talk to Mass Audubon. That's been corroborated by town administration. That says, let's go talk to Mass Audubon and have Mr. Proyer, Mr. Evers, Mr. Hoagland, and I talk to Mass Audubon. And then if there's beef there, we can bring that back and then discuss as a board what next steps are. Right? I respect what you're saying about what both of you were saying about the pile of things that we're putting in front of town administration right now. So I'm respectful of that, but I'm also mindful that we want to move this forward, or at least know if this has a chance of being viable, right? And so I'm willing to sign up to do that with your authorization. So if people are comfortable with that, that's step one. We see if this is viable or not, right? And I know enough about this, the background of this, to understand what the issues are. And any gaps I have, I can just ask questions. All right, there are enough people here, there's enough history here that I can follow up with it. And then I can report back to the board what our findings are and have the Solwyn Committee folks be here as well to offer their perspective, in case I garble it.
Yeah, look, I'm open to that, and I'd make a motion as to such, but I guess for feedback for that process, I guess I would want to examine the power of the possible. You know, what are the extremes we're talking about? Is this property available for sale? Let's go to the one extreme. And then, if not, whittling it back step by step. To what degree can we retain control, ownership, whatever that is? Are there offsets available? I mean, there are all kinds of hypotheticals. So my suggestion is that conversation is scenario-based, right? Let's listen to what they have, but go in there armed with 3 or 4 different options and just stress test them.
Good point. Mr. Sidney.
I would love to see this project go forward. You know, there's some interesting history here that I think is worth preserving. I think there are too many unknowns at this point to deeply involve administration anymore. And of course, if we get to agreements, of course, we're also going to have to remember that we're going to be involving council as well. And council's got a lot of work to do for us as well. So we got to have a really, and I'm willing to support a motion Mr. Joseph would make. But I think we need to come back with a really solid idea of what's possible before we start to engage administration again.
Okay, we're at 9:22, and we've got a lot to get through here. So I have a motion from Mr. Joseph, seconded by Mr. Sidney, to authorize me to work with the Sullivan House Committee people to talk to Mass Audubon and then report back to this board. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so we got a 4-1-0.
Who was the nay?
Catherine. Oh.
All right, well,
Please, Mr.
My name is George Sullivan. I've been part of both
The
committees.
mic, please.
Mike, please.
I've been part of both Sullivan House committees. The first one that was established to look at all the options. Those options were brought to town meeting. They made a decision about moving forward. The second committee was formed to investigate a transfer of ownership. So since that time, I've got to ask, I've got some materials that I'd like to give to you. There are some copyright issues at hand. I'm not sure whether that can be honored if I hand these to you.
Probably not. Once presented at a public meeting, they're a public document.
So these were given to me by the town of Southborough. They gave me permission to print them and to give them to you, but not to be reproduced.
Unfortunately, I don't think we can. If they're part of the public record, they'll become part of the minutes.
Yeah.
Can they be shown to you?
That's
No,
part of the
and
minutes.
it's
It's
part of the
a
public meeting.
exhibit
As
as
soon
part
as
of the
we-
minutes. They have to
as soon as we
become
see
part of the
it, we
public
have to-
record.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
sorry.
Can you summarize the
Master
gist
will,
somehow? Can you summarize the gist of
Well,
what it tells us?
the first one is the 1659 grant that establishes Natick as a community set aside for the purpose of the Indians that lived there. The second is a grant dated 1685, the Indians asking permission to the general court, asking permission to sell Thomas Sullivan up to 50 acres of land in exchange for him building a grist mill. I have, unfortunately, the translations are in the back for you, but okay. Then the next one is a 1686 March deed that transfers 5 acres, the first 5 acres, the first 5 of 50 acres to Thomas Sullivan, signed by a number of native people who occupied the town at that time. The next was the second deed, which completed the 50, dated in 1686. Again, that transferred the remaining 45 some odd acres, again, in exchange for establishing the grist mill. So I had hoped to share those with you, but copyright laws, I guess, prevail and won't allow me to do that. I can offer you some pictures that I've taken of the property, the house, some interesting features of the house, just for your own information, if that's okay.
That would be fine.
So there's pictures of the house, there's pictures of the trees that were planted 300 years ago. There's a stone in the foundation that has been carved with the initials of the original owners and occupants, Thomas Sullivan and his grandson. And on the back are pictures of the sawmill, the grist mill as it stood around the year 1900, and the remains of the sawmill and a remaining grist stone, that is still
Thank you.
So to wrap, I'm sorry, George.
That's all I really wanted to share with you. Thanks.
Thank you for that. May I ask a question of you? Hold on, George. Does the Natick Historical Society have those documents?
They do not. They've not been seen by very many people. He's been in the possession of the Solomon family for some number of years before they were donated to the Southborough Historic Society.
Would it be an imposition to see if you could reach out to the Natick Historical Society to see if they'd be interested?
I'd be very happy to make them available. I of course, would need permission from Southborough.
Right.
But he's been really terrific about the whole thing. He just doesn't want them reproduced.
No, I understand.
So,
Okay, thank you.
yep, most welcome.
Yeah. All right.
And I'm sorry, the email that I sent you just Troy, the presentation that I was going to offer.
Well, it's a link, so I just won't download it.
Okay. Thank you very much. And Mr. Hoagland, and I will reach out to set up a time that will work.
I'm available.
All right. That's the word we like to hear. All right. Thank you very much for waiting tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on to,
Thanks for your time, folks.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Good night.
Let's go to charter changes.
Can I ask a quick question,
Yes.
Mr. Chair? So at our agenda prep meeting yesterday, we talked about the idea of potentially having a meeting next Wednesday as
Right.
well, which could also cover some of these items. So I just want to think through just timing and
You know what?
that while we go into this discussion, because I'm just thinking of the
Yeah.
9:30
Yeah,
hour.
Actually, I think that's a great suggestion because many of these things just came to us at the 11th hour.
Well, I want to point out that,
Hold on, Rich.
yeah,
Right? So what I'd like to do is just talk briefly about some of the things that have been going on by our working group representation to the Charter and Bylaw Review Committee, and then take up further discussion of this next Wednesday, the 27th. Does that make sense?
yeah, and I just want to point out, the CBRC is going before FinCom next Tuesday with some of these changes. So if there are any critical changes we want to suggest that they make, and I know there's at least one, we should identify them tonight so that I can send them over to the chair of the CBRC.
We're going to meet next week to discuss them. We'd be meeting after the presentation to FinCom.
Right, but if there are minor changes, I'm really talking about critical changes like up to 5 years rather than minor tweaks that,
No, I understand that. I just don't know that we've been able to actually dive into this.
Yeah, and that's my point is let's handle it this way. Our two designees are on my left and my right. Right. So why don't we, the other three of us, send our comments to one of them, not both of them. In fact, send them to Rich,
Yes, that's a good idea.
because we don't want, if we send it to three, it's a quorum, right? And we're deliberating out of a open meeting. So we can't do that. So please send any comments, especially show-stopping things that you might see in what's been provided, to Mr. Sidney. And then we can discuss it. We'll all tune into the FinCom meeting, or at least some of us.
Yeah, I'll do that.
And then we'll have an inkling of what's changed.
well, one thing I would like is, we had an earlier discussion, I had an earlier discussion with Jamie about the contract lengths for the appointed officials, and he pointed out that town meeting actually got a special act to allow 5-year contracts. The current language that we've been presented with from the CBRC says 3 years. I would like to basically have approval to send the CBRC a note, say, please change that to up to 5 years, so that we get that right before it goes to FinCom. That's the one critical thing I heard so far. I'm sure there are a few other things. If you want to meet tomorrow, we can go over what you've got.
Sure.
Just give me a call.
Okay.
I can't meet Friday morning because I'm having 2 root canals.
Oh,
Okay. Maybe I'll catch you right after that so that I get everything I want.
Is that a
Great
metaphor
idea.
for this
Right.
process or actual appointments?
Just a meeting for the.
What's our deadline to get these to Rich?
Get them to me by the weekend, please.
Sunday night,
Sunday night would be good.
that'll give them Monday to get it to them.
And if you have questions that you want answers to, call me. Like, a one-on-one conversation's okay, I can answer questions.
Yep.
Because I've been actually pretty deeply involved in their discussions so far.
Okay. So we're deferring, unless there's objection, we're deferring all that further discussion to Wednesday, the 27th.
Mr. Chair, the planning board is meeting that night on all the zoning articles as well, and I will be presenting as a citizen petitioner for one of those, so I might have a conflict and have to excuse myself from one meeting to join the other, but
Sure.
just as a heads up.
Sure.
Happy to participate as much as I can.
For that.
I'm sorry, is that on the 27th?
Okay. Maybe I can speak to somebody in,
Well, it's tricky
first.
because this petition sort of falls in with the other one, so there's still kind of a wild card with where it's going to fall, so, yeah, but I can jump, from one to the other.
To that end, we won't be in this room. We'll probably be either upstairs or in the library.
right, this is their regularly scheduled meeting next week, so we'll be,
Sorry?
Preferably upstairs if I'm jumping.
Yeah, no, I have to probably step into that meeting as well.
okay. All right,
Is this the best time to talk about other scheduled conflicts?
sure.
Okay. I brought up some time ago that I had a conflict with the 18th, but we never, I'm sorry?
October.
Yeah, October 18th. But we were never able to settle on another date. I also now have a conflict with the 4th, and it's quite rare. I don't foresee that going forward and haven't had that prior to. But I don't want to miss both, so I'd like for at least one of them to be moved.
Okay. So what we can do with that is put out a poll and see what people's availability are. Honestly, I would prefer that we move, I would prefer to have the whole board here for the October 4th or environs, because that's prior to town meeting. That's probably our last, well, it is our last meeting before town meeting, so if anything comes up, we could address it there.
Okay.
So I'll send out a note for that week. I'd prefer to stay with, not change 2 of them, but,
Understood.
so,
And just for consideration too, thinking about we could schedule before a town meeting session too, if as things come up, just, a lot of us do focus on town meeting. I know it's not necessarily preferable because it's short notice, but
Yeah.
depending on what we're considering,
yeah.
just to give
it
some calendar
Depends on
relief.
the size of the
Yeah.
agenda, of course.
Yeah.
October 4th, right, as of right now, was a pretty heavy agenda, honestly. So I think probably we couldn't do it before a town meeting session.
10-4.
I'll also note on the 4th, some of the items, actually many of the items, we did have others planning to attend.
Right. That's the other-
So for example, we had the Economic Development Committee representatives lined up for the 4th, as well as members of town
Sustainability.
staff and Sustainability Committee. So coordination of just I'm not saying don't do it, I'm just saying we'll have to also then coordinate with those other groups
Yeah.
as well to make sure they're available.
Okay. A
The 4th
complex
seems to be
linear program.
fairly complex. The 18th is less so. We don't have too much on that night so far.
Well, what,
But I know that's also a big night, and if you're missing it, it's a balance. I just want to make sure that we're balancing that.
And I can,
let me do a hypothetical. Do I have that backwards? Should we stay with the 4th as is and move the 18th? Given that,
yeah, that's the one I
We're
brought
gonna
up
move the
some
18th too.
in the
I can't be there
summer.
Monday night.
I know, that leaves, that's the problem, is three of us are town meeting members, right? So
Well,
that eliminates Tuesday, Thursday.
And Monday night, I'm doing prep for,
Right.
so I'm not going to be able to sit here.
All right, so let's do this. Let's sort of look at both weeks and see what the availability is for everyone, and then we'll figure out which one we move. And, we can coordinate with the people on the 4th who were planning to attend. But the degrees of freedom on the 4th are better because town meeting hasn't started, and that gives us Tuesday, Thursday to work with.
And if it looks like it's too much, it's all good. I had brought up the 18th over the summer.
Yeah, that one I know.
And we just somehow never were able to nail a date down. So if it's, the 4th sounds like it would be a lot to adjust, so I can understand leaving that one as is. And potentially if the 18th is able to be moved, then maybe we were able to move that. And if we're not, we're not.
Didn't we say, kind of consider the 16th? There was a hypothetical, can we
thought we
move? Yeah, because I have it hold in my calendar for
Yeah,
the
I thought
16th.
I did too. I was just trying to remember.
That's Monday night. I can't be here
You can't, on the 16th, you can't.
on the 16th, and it's because I'm doing some procedure prep.
No, I got it.
Probably not worth it.
No.
Not even worth it.
That's worse than the 2 root canals.
How about the 11th? How about the previous ones? We'd have 2 Wednesdays in a row. Instead of the 18th, we'd meet the week before town meeting on the 11th.
I also have a hold on that. I don't know if we talked about it, but, yeah.
Not that this should change the conversation, that is Columbus Day week, so the Monday town hall will be closed, so we'll have to post all agenda items, preferably that Thursday or Friday before, and it's really just the day after the previous meeting. Not that we can't do that, it's just
A lot.
sometimes back-to-back with a holiday baked in might lead to a pretty
And-
small-ish agenda.
Yeah. And there's kind of a ripple effect too, which is then, the next meeting would have been early November, right? So then you'll have a 3-week
Yeah.
gap.
I could have sworn I marked town meeting in here.
One item we've also discussed, or the board has also discussed, is a potential retreat night. Maybe in October, maybe in November. I know one thing that was on my plate for an October, November timeframe that I talked with the chair about is similar to how we discussed and had a retreat with the new, at that time, Chief Fursky in his first 3 to 6 months here. And then we also did something with our new communications person. I was thinking that would be a good opportunity for our new Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Outreach to do something similar, like a retreat, just to have a more one-on-one with the board. That usually are off-cycle meetings, but perhaps it's just a factor to not load it on, but we just need to figure out where does that go as well.
That might be worth doing on the 11th kind of thing. If we could-
I'd have to check with him to make sure he's prepared for that, because I know he's been working on some presentation materials, so.
Okay.
Is that an urgent meeting?
No, that's not urgent. I just like to give face time to some of our new
Right.
officials, which, especially in this case, there's, and the same with the Chief Fursky and the communications person, there's a lot of focus from the board on board goals and objectives moving forward, and I want to make sure early in their work with the town, they're getting some face time and feedback from the board, so that as they advance, they know, okay, yeah, this is direct feedback from the board as to where I should be taking the work I'm doing.
And we also need to discuss your contract.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
I think there's a deadline at the end of this month to determine if we're going to discuss the contract.
I already determined that, so we're all set. I made that decision. Yeah, we do need to do that before the end of the month. And when's our next meeting?
Next Wednesday.
Let me look at the contract. It might not need to be a vote, but if we can add it to next week's meeting.
For the sake of brevity, could I just make a motion that we consider your contract?
It's not on the agenda.
Nope.
No, I can't. How about select board concerns? I'm concerned that we've not.
You can, and we'll put it on the
Yeah,
agenda
and
next
then
week.
we'll put it on for next.
That's good.
Do town councils have this kind of problem? Sorry, never mind. Yeah, next Wednesday, I think we'll be able to be
Wednesday.
compliant, and I think that's, just it's clear. That's the way to do it.
Good. Okay, so we'll work out the deets on that. So just so I'm understanding, we're going to stick with the 4th, have the 11th, and nuke the 18th? Is that what I'm hearing?
Right, but we need to be very aggressive in setting that agenda, like.
For the 11th?
The one on the 11th that we're moving.
Yep.
Because of the holiday.
Yep. So that bit pretty much we have to be working on pretty soon.
Bruce, would you send these dates out in an email, please?
Again, I'm sorry.
Would you send these dates out in an email?
Yeah.
Thank you.
For confirmation purposes, if, assuming the 18th, oh, I know the 18th is no longer, but then the next meeting after that would be the 1st of November. Just,
My guess is we're probably going to have one for various executive session items anyway.
yeah, I'm just making sure that from the regular meeting cadence perspective, 4th, 11th, then 1st of November.
Yeah.
Partially, if the public's watching, I see it's really Richard and John and
Well, we don't know who's
Jonah.
actually watching the government channel.
But it's just a matter of just making sure we document how that cadence is going to work.
Yeah.
And are we definitely not meeting on the 16th, or is that still a potential for a retreat? or- I just want to block nights, like if we're thinking the 16th, if we're thinking the
Oh, it's-
25th, I want to put a block.
That's going to become the 11th, I think.
All right, so no 16th, but possibly the 25th. That's what I'm hearing for another offsite.
Possibly.
The 25th as well? You mentioned we're jumping to November, but I'm hearing we have a lot to do, so.
Sure, that's possible. Yeah, it's possible.
25th is the
to
other
block
Wednesday that's in
Right.
October.
Yeah, which would be wedged between town meetings, so.
it. Yep.
Unless we're done by then.
So we may miss, 2 or weeks, but we're gonna meet 4 weeks in a row, right?
Yep.
20th, the 27th, the 4th, the 11th.
Yep. Busy time. Okay. All right, so I did send out select board committee assignments. So some people have let their preferences be known. 2 of them were the question on the the CPC committee,
Community preservation.
community preservation. Did I see? Yeah.
So I just want to make sure the acronym is what you're thinking.
No.
There's too many acronyms, so.
Yeah, there are. That's okay. I keep wanting to say CDC every time.
Community Development Corporation?
No, Community Center for Disease Control.
Center for Disease Control? Okay. There's too many CDCs.
Yes. All right.
So I currently serve as a liaison to the Metro MWRC.
The WRTA?
The RTA.
Nope, that's.
Oh, the MWRC, yeah,
I'm
Metro West Regional
MWRC.
Collaborative.
Yeah, Josh
That's part of
Ostroff.
MAPC, is MWRC.
Okay.
It's the region.
The MWRC is part of the MAPC, and
Yeah.
that's not, but I currently do that, so.
Okay.
I mean, it's not a select board thing.
That's not an appointment though, right? Is that
It was,
It's a select board.
It is.
Usually there's a
Joseph
select
made the
board seat on
appointment.
there.
Yeah, MWRC is Natick Center Associates. I'm currently serving as a liaison to that. And then I'd recommended or suggested, I'm on the Natick 180, but I would recommend a new person taking that over as they go through their new cycle. Since I'm not running for reelection, whoever covers it this fiscal year should probably get started sooner rather than later.
it's a good idea.
And I'm happy to stay on board for a meeting or two to transition that. And then the rink oversight committee as well.
That
I
one's
ask
a
a question?
relatively light lift.
It's very light lift.
Yeah,
They meet
I was going to ask,
handful of times a year, if
get to
that.
join the Zamboni once or?
Yeah.
Well, I think, they're going through, there's going to be a new contract and some considerations based on that last meeting, it sounds like, but
Okay.
nothing heavy, yeah.
Yeah, and I think even with that group, we've tried to add in some cadences of not that committee, but the actual user groups getting together, which should actually change that a little bit as well.
Great.
Yeah, and I've already contacted, you assigned me the Audit Advisory Committee. I've already contacted as many committee members as I could find. There's no sitting chair or vice chair, so I'm just going to call a meeting. And there's one set of outstanding minutes that they haven't approved yet. that I got from the former clerk, who's no longer a member of the committee. So, and then we'll have to figure out what the committee is going to, I'll have to figure out what the charge of the committee is, but first we got to reorganize.
Good first step.
I'm open to any of the three, Bruce. I reached out to you, but I'm open to any of the community preservation, the Council on Aging, or the Cultural Council.
Yeah, and I think I sent you everything I was,
Yep.
Is the Cultural Council the Natick Center Associates?
Yeah.
No, it's different. Okay.
Now, the Cultural Council is a state
Yeah, it is. a state,
entity.
yeah.
The Natick Center Cultural District
Gotcha.
is the designation of the partnership between Natick Center Associates and the town. Those are separate things.
And that's the one you're liaison to?
Yeah.
right? And you're the MAPC?
Yes.
Right.
The regional.
Somehow I don't have that on my
Yes, I'm
thing, so
on
I'll put you
affordable
down for
housing
that.
and that.
All right.
There are things like the MWRTA. I don't see it on this current
Yeah.
list.
Josh Ostroff still represents the town.
Correct, yes, I'm just saying
Oh,
those
but
are
it's not
also
on there,
appointments. It's not currently on this list, but,
Right.
and there's an MBTA advisory committee that
Right.
Josh also sits on behalf of the town.
Is Josh still sitting to the MWRTA? I thought that was because of his position, now is no longer. I could be wrong.
No,
that-
they told
he
me,
still?
yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it
Does
just
he-
needs to be a town resident, I
I'll
believe.
talk to him.
Or it doesn't even have to be
Say-
that. I think I sat on the MWRTA for a little while on
He
behalf of the
did,
town.
yeah. Well, I remember
CED role.
when their directors stepped down, there was a conversation about that. I thought Mr. Ostroff had to step back because of his obligations with work, but I could be wrong. So that's,
He's with the city of Newton now, so I'm not sure there
right.
Yeah,
are any more previous work, maybe. But putting that aside,
I can check with him.
Yeah, please, thank you.
and the board also has already appointed an appointment to MAPC, not the MWR, too many acronyms. MWRC, which is the Metro West Regional Collaborative, which is a formalized group under MAPC, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which is our regional planning agency based out of Boston. We also have a seat on MAPC that Amanda Loomis sits on, and I'm the alternate. That was already approved. This goes back a little ways by the board.
Okay, so I'm now confused. I thought Catherine was on the MAPC, but it's Amanda.
MWRC is what Catherine's on.
I'm on the baby group.
She's in the regional.
I'm in the
There's a
regional group.
regional
Right.
collaborative group,
Got it. So she's the
MAPC stands for what?
MWRC?
Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Okay.
Yep.
So Boston Region has a regional
Got it.
council of governments,
You're
so
on the
it's what
subset.
it's often called in other states. And it's required by federal statute for us to receive federal dollars, but big cities like Boston also have just other state and other dollars that go into it. It's a regional planning agency. They help us with regional planning, sustainability advocacy at the State House. It's a whole host, transportation. We've used them for technical assistance on planning work. They also just help with regional procurement. So some of our procurement through like police or fire or Board of Health, they actually help procure things on behalf of the region. But they represent 101 or 151, I think it's 101.
I say 121, but
Towns and cities in the Boston region.
That's a lot of.
There's much smaller ones elsewhere in the Commonwealth. So like Worcester has one, Lowell has one. There's PVPC, which is Pioneer Valley Planning Commission for the Pioneer Valley, Berkshire. But the towns, and one, we pay an assessment annually to it. It's required to. It's based on population. And then two, we have seats on the council. That council also has set up, because the Boston one is so big, regional working groups that meet monthly, every couple months, depending on how active they are. Metro West is unique because we actually have an additional assessment, so that we get an additional staff person that helps us specifically for Metro West, and we have a seat on that as well.
Oh, nice. Okay. Thank you.
But then there's other regions. There's an intercore committee. I used to sit on that when I was in Everett. There's it's broken up into subgroups, basically.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, that really helped.
Yeah.
Their website's very extensive. You can go check
It
that out.
is.
They have a very strong data center, so a lot of the population projections
Yes.
that school districts or even the towns use, their data center is very extensive on that.
That is good.
And Mr. Evans, if I may, I can't stress strongly enough the Natick 180, the need for involvement with that is really pervasive. I think we get a lot of good feedback on public safety, but it does touch on issues that we are responsible for, like alcohol licensing and sort of how we're addressing tobacco use and things like that in the community as well, mental health. So it's a broad coalition, and I think just whoever signs up for it, there are a couple of different
I'll
areas.
sign up for it.
Oh, okay.
That's also key for the opioid funds that are coming in. We heard from a prior presentation that we have some opioids fund coming in. Those are going to be coming in over the next many years. And Natick 180 is going to be a big driver, really, leader on how to most appropriately utilize those funds.
All right, so I'll do another draft of this and send it around. And thank you for all your feedback and on the omissions particularly. Okay. Last but not least, let's see. Let's go, actually, there are a few things. Let's go to the consent agenda, though.
All right. I'm going to start by saying, I'll read it in, but we're going to pull item E for the meeting minutes, and I'll explain why after I read everything. So the consent agenda, item A, approve Becky Williams' request for a block party in the Lewis Street neighborhood. Item B, approve Sarah Grossman's request to reserve 3 parking spaces in front of TCAN on October 14th. Item C, approve Liz Hunt's request for a block party on Winnemay Street on October 15th. Item D, approve Natick Art Association's request for closing Court Street for an event and some signage. Item E is the meeting minutes for April 12th, which we're going to pull. And item F is approve a change of date for a 1-day liquor license request from the Natick Community Organic Farm for the Harvest Dinner, which is changing from the 16th to the 17th of September. So anything else we want to pull besides the meeting minutes?
Nope.
Okay, I move approval of items A, B, C, D, and F.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0-0.
So I don't want to spend time right now going through all the details of the changes that got missed. So I still have a copy of the minutes that I sent to Joan, and if anybody, I know I have one change that didn't get in, and if anybody has other changes, send them along to me and I'll make sure they get incorporated and sent to Joan.
Can you send us the copy that you have so that we know whether the changes we've submitted are in that or not?
I actually sent, when I
You
sent them
sent
to
that
Joan,
already?
I sent them to you and Catherine as well.
Good. Okay,
So,
good.
so I don't want to make any motions with that stuff.
Yep. Town administrator notes?
We covered quite a bit tonight, and I know it's almost 10 o'clock. We're going to meet next week. I want to just apologize for not having completed some of the fall annual town meeting stuff with regards to Articles 27 and 28. We've just had a lot of moving things happening in the last couple of weeks in the offices. One just brief update. We did have our IT director, Andre, you might have already heard this, submit his resignation. It came very quickly. We've been sort of working very diligently to make sure we had transition from him. In the interim, we've been working through a lot of collaboration with the school department and their IT department. Dennis Roach is the head of the school IT department, who's provided us with amazing support. We were already ready working to hire in that department, the town IT department. We had to put that on pause while we worked on the transition, but we are going to bring that back. And I just want the board to know that we're getting great partnership with the schools on this one. And I'm just really excited. I'm bummed that we lost Andre, but I'm excited that we're seeing the benefits of the collaboration there with the school department. So I'm hopeful that we can continue down that path. Another item is for the next meeting, probably next Wednesday, I'm hopeful to have a recommendation for a town clerk appointment. So just give you that heads up. Won't say who yet because it's still being worked on, and it's obviously subject to your confirmation per the charter. But I'm hopeful that we can have a little bit of overlap with Ms. Packer before she's officially retired. She is aware that we're trying to do an overlap, so I know the appointment timing might be a little bit interesting since she's technically retiring per her resolution on the 8th.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind the appointment before her resignation so that we can have that overlap.
Good idea.
Any other?
Anything else, John?
I'll just quickly give a big kudos to the Rec and Parks team for their great work at Natick Days. A great event. We did have a couple things that came up, nothing that they couldn't handle. And we are going to debrief this year. This is Travis's first year. Luckily, we had a lot of past year support. But, you know, there are some things that came up that we want to debrief on and just improve our policies and our practice moving forward. It's gotten very big. In a good way. It's just something that we need to be mindful of, especially as we go into, I think next year is going to be even more interesting because it's going to be another 1 year of coming out of the pandemic with more people coming out, but also it enters a political year. So we're probably going to see some, you know, if you recall the last round of political years, it wasn't at Natick Days, but the Common became a very festive place during certain times of the weekends or years, and we want to be mindful of that as we go into next year's Natick Days and just a lot of other events that are happening on the Common as well.
That actually is a good segue to a discussion that we need to have for policies, because I know we were discussing
Town Common policy is a big one. Yep.
Right. So that.
Yep. Luckily, we're going into a season where the Town Common is going to be less used.
Right. So
that's a good time to talk about the policy. We're also looking at the banner policy coming up. Actually, that's a good, and I'll try to stop. Internally, John, Donna, and I have scheduled a regular every 2-week meeting. We're going to spend 1 hour every 2 weeks just to go from A to Z on select board policies, just so that we can help inform you on what we see as opportunities. We're not going to tackle the ones that you've already done in the last couple of years, like alcohol or water and sewer abatements or things like that, but we want to just have a deep dive into all the policies, bring in town staff. Next meeting, for example, on October 4th, we were planning on discussing the tree policy. I know that's T, not A, but it's timely because of Treegate that we just had. So we figured that's a good opportunity for, and I sat down with John Westerling and Art Goodhine in our DPW department to say, where do you see improvements? How can we make this better? And they have some thoughts on that. So we'll start bringing those forward in the coming weeks and months ahead.
Awesome.
The arbor policy.
Could we call it an arbor policy? There we go. Change the name of it.
There you go. Arbor Gate, is that what you said? Right.
A arbor policy, so it's double A.
That sounds like a pirate.
An arbor policy. We don't want to be Michigan, though.
All right. Any select board concerns other than the ones previously expressed?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Coughlin?
I've previously requested just one-on-one with the town administrator to have a review before this board on the water sewer rates at a 6-month point. So if we could look at that maybe in early January.
Yeah, and this is in relation to, because there were so many adjustments this past year, seeing how those came out.
Yes,
And
looking at the new
what
tier
type of
structure.
impact they're happening. Yep.
And what kind of data, the same type of data that they did before, not asking for a big lift. I've heard from residents that their water bill has gone up substantially. And so I've been directing them to WaterSmart and saying that this, we're going to be revisiting this. So that was something I wanted to, maybe for early January. A second item I had was committee minutes. So the committees that are appointed by the select board have not made some of them have not made significant progress in updating their minutes. And I know that Joan had a list that I had given you about where they were and the ones that were missing, and she was following up with committees. Could you just check with her and let me know, or let us know the next meeting how that's coming? And my third concern was select board minutes. I'd like to propose, and this is fine for discussion at another time, I'd like to propose that we consider a policy, a select board policy, whereby minutes are returned to us for review within 2 or 3 weeks from a meeting, whether it's executive or open session, and then that we put them on the next agenda for for review and release, except for executive session where they're not reviewed or released until review by council and the matter is closed. But I kind of feel like without a policy, we're not making substantive progress on moving through minutes in a timely fashion. I'm open to ideas about how to do that.
Just a question for clarification. Are you talking about current minutes as we go through meetings? Or are you talking historical
The
also?
historical thing, I'm going
Your mic's up.
to postpone.
Your mic is up.
The historical item, let's postpone that until after I get a better handle on what that issue is. I'm talking about current ones. So we just took April 14th, and we're at the end of September. We just took that off the agenda. So I would like to see us make a concerted effort. I do know staff has vacations, and we've got town meeting coming up, but I've been asking for this for a year and a half. So I'd like to either consider a policy or some type of definition where we set expectations and say, this is the expectation of the board.
I'm not sure if we need a policy or not, but I think your expectation is reasonable. Within 3 weeks of a meeting, I would say that there's and that's why I asked the question of current versus historic. My recollection of the strategy was to sort of address it from both sides.
Yes.
Keep current and then chip away at the backlog. What I'd like to see is an accelerated chip away at the backlog, right? But certainly for going forward this meeting, I think most of us, or all of us, are we in agreement that 3 weeks is plenty of time to do it? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you've seen when I've done the few sets of minutes I've done, if they weren't out the next day, they were no later than a week later.
Right.
It should be really possible to get the minutes out, even if they're being done off the recording, to get them within, get them out to us in a couple of weeks.
I mean, we also have staff that have a lot of other responsibilities. So while I agree with you in substance, Rich, I also want to be mindful and just set an expectation. I feel like 3 weeks is reasonable. We turn them around within a week, and that means that staff is making all of the corrections and not the select board. So we mark them up and give them back. But I'm feeling a tremendous amount of pressure in the amount of time I'm spending on select board items. And I'd like to see us be able to free some of that up and focus on getting things accomplished. And my last concern is making sure that we review put on the agenda for next week, the town administrator's contract.
Yep, already noted. Okay.
Belt and suspenders.
Okay. And don't have any correspondence, I think, that I know of. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Sidney, seconded by Ms. Copeland. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are done at 10:03. Sorry for the late night.